Chapter 876, The First Horseman Part 2. The light spread from the crystal on his chest throughout his body, lighting his vein with the rhythmical pulse of a beating heart. The white glow invaded his eyes, twisting his features into a more controlled expression while his voice became chipper and calm, no longer sounding like a tantruming child. Gods, if I love humans. So pure, so honest with themselves, so stupid. I should have given up on greater undead centuries ago. They are so annoying with their pondering each and every step before even taking it. Their long lives make them too cautious, whereas humans are like butterflies. Their existence is so short, and they are so eager to get everything they want that taking over is almost too easy. Almost, the thing wearing Acula said. Agreed. Controlling vampires is hard. They keep resisting me even after this long. Their thralls, instead, are just sweet little lambs. The undead speaking was the same one Acula had been hitting until a second ago. She looked like a middle-aged woman in her 50s who, while alive, had clearly enjoyed the pleasures of the flesh too much, to the point that undeath had yet to get rid of all the lines on her face and the fat from her body. Yet the voice coming out of her mouth was identical to Acula's. Talking to myself is pleasant, but inefficient. Let's start the reunion. The thing wearing Acula said. The perfect prism in the ranger's chest collected the thoughts and experiences from its lesser versions and then charged them back to their full power, making them shine as bright as the original. This Verhen guy is more annoying than I thought. He easily disposed of 6 of my spawns. Sure, half of them were vampires still resisting my control, and all of them were at half the charge due to building that damn machine. But still, the good news is that I've got an idea of what he's capable of. I can use such knowledge to outnumber and outmatch him. It's the perfect option to get away with it and achieve the kind of wealth I need. The bad news is that the machine is an utter fiasco. The moment my spawns died, I lost all of their memories and abilities. I still have a long way to go before becoming perfect. The cursed object known as Bright Day, the Horseman of Dawn, started to plan ahead how to exploit Litha's presence to receive a huge reward without arousing any suspicion. To accomplish her true goal, she needed an enormous amount of gold. She had already tried to obtain it by theft, but that kind of riches was heavily protected, making them very hard to procure and impossible to spend without getting caught. While plotting her next move, she lulled what remained of Acula's broken personality with promises of wealth, power, and respect. He was her inferior half and the answer to all of her prayers. By making him a hero, the Griffin Kingdom would give Bright Day everything she wanted on a silver platter and thank her for that. Rising and controlling undead was her specialty after all, and the undead invasion was the perfect opportunity to make her puppy known as the Court's Bane. If only those undead fools from the Dawn Court knew that they took their name from me. Now I'm going to take everything from them. She giggled. After escaping certain death, the hybrid creature who had attacked Lith fell asleep the moment he allowed himself to relax. Light magic had completely restored his body, and his 2 cores recovered fast thanks to their synergy. He shape-shifted in his human form, to relieve his body from the burden of the transformation and further improve his recovery speed. I was a fool falling for Dawn's trickery. It must have tainted the other ranger with its stench to throw me off its trail. The hybrid thought, unaware that he couldn't have been more wrong. In his fury, he had simply mistaken Solas's scent for Dawn's because Acula's musk had stuck on Lith during the time they had walked together. Unlike Lith, who bathed regularly in his tower, the other ranger had forgotten about personal hygiene after being alone in the wilds for so long. Right now I have no chance against the artifact. The only silver lining is that it doesn't know I'm here yet. He sat cross-legged on a mountaintop, calling the world energy to himself. The breathing technique was no invigoration, but it allowed the twin cores to breathe in what the other breathed out. This way, no world energy was wasted, generating a slow but constant flow that would give the hybrid his lost mana back in just a few hours. Meanwhile, hundreds of meters underground, Lith didn't like his situation one bit. This place isn't like Kula at all. Kula was a still active military base, whereas these are ancient ruins. Lith thought. The defensive arrays are long dead. The magical stuff I recovered had their pseudo-cores depleted, and the books I found were so moldy that not even Solaspedia can read their content. Yet someone went to the trouble of reactivating the dimensional blocking array, deleting dozens of road signs, and ransacking what's left of the labs to build that machine. At first, I thought that the vampires were after the device Aquila described. It was the only thing that could explain their extraordinary abilities and why they bothered to stay here for so long instead of running away. Yet if the machine was so important, they wouldn't leave it unguarded. Not only that, Solus said while checking her own memories. Without the possibility to move the ODI tomes inside Solispedia, it had taken her a while to compare the mold Lith had taken with the machine they had found in Kulla. That thing is no body-swapping device, nor is it in any way related to the light element. From what I understand, it doesn't affect the mind of the subject, only the body. How exactly? Lith asked. I'm really starting to think that I spoiled you too much. I don't have all the answers after just a few looks. We need some reference material or experiment with the machine ourselves. Solus was both proud and annoyed by how much faith Lith had in her. Any idea about what the prism does? Lith had examined it with invigoration, but being the prism an inanimate object, he had discovered nothing from it. I think it's related to the crystal-like substance the thralls turned into after you killed them, but the how and why are beyond me. She telepathically shrugged. They spent the rest of the hour exploring the complex and discussing the unknown hybrid's physiology. Lith was certain to have never met the guy before, yet his abilities were too similar to the odd undead he had faced for it to be just a coincidence. The way he mixed light and fire to create heat rays, the hard light constructs. Everything matches, but their modus operandi. He used true magic and ranted a lot, whereas the undead used mostly arrays and kept their mouths shut. Lith thought. All those unanswered questions coupled with the stale air were giving him a royal headache. Agreed. It's a long shot, but if I had to take an educated guess, I'd say that they had the same teacher. Solus replied. Lith went back to the starting cave, finding a tense Aquila waiting for him. The ranger was no longer dejected, and an unwavering will shone inside his green eyes. Chapter 877 Master and Servant Part 1. Have you found anything interesting? Aquila asked with a smug grin on his face. Only the warp gate. Aside from that, just empty caves and lots of dirt. Lith lied, dusting his shoulders. No trace of the undead either. Well, it seems it's up to me saving the day, huh? It took me a bit of luck, but I found ODI writings engraved on the walls. You can read them? Lith opened wide his eyes for an instant, feigning surprise and ignorance. Of course I can. Sort of. After hearing about the Kulla incident, I thought that not everyone can be so lucky to have professors by their side when they stumble upon ancient ruins. I researched the ODI a bit before resuming duty since they gave even the great Ranger Verhen a hard time. Aquila mistook Lith's grimace for envy, while it was his usual glare. He knows about the ODI. How surprisingly convenient. Lith thought while a few pieces fell into place. I followed the signs pointing at some kind of lab until my detection arrays spotted our enemies and several dormant magical formations. I think they didn't expect us to find their lair this fast, nor that we would deactivate their alarms on our way in. I counted 15 of them. The others must have left to capture more humans to replace the thralls you killed. There were still too many of them to take them on by myself, but together we have a chance. Divide and conquer, I say. First, we kill the undead that are still here with an ambush, and then we can easily get rid of the second group upon their return. We have all the time we need to set up enough arrays to make my plan work. Aquila's patronizing voice almost made Lith chuckle. Almost. He curled his upper lip instead, pretending to be angry with himself and with his fellow ranger. It's a good plan, but 15 is still quite the number. Maybe we should get out and report everything to Commander Barian. Lith said. Report what? That we found a junk pile? I already gave the location of the lair and the enemy numbers in my previous report. Barian knows as much as we do. Aquila sneered. Reinforcements are already on their way. They might even get rid of the missing undead for us if they stumble into them. We don't have much time to waste. If the vampires disable the dimensional array, they can pack up and leave in a jiffy. If they manage to get away, it will be on you. Seeing that Lith was still hesitating, Aquila softened up and changed approach. Come on. You've already killed 6 of them all by yourself, and with no time to prepare. With the 2 of us and a proper set of arrays, 15 is nothing to be afraid of. Once we get our reward, the first round is on me. Make it 2 rounds and I'm in. Lith said with a stressed sigh as if he was still reluctant, but could not deny his rival's logic. Stop being so glum. We don't need to like each other to have some fun together. Follow me and I promise that I'll get you wasted for good. Akela smiled while caressing his chest, where one of Dawn's corners slightly protruded. Lith followed his colleague along the stone corridors, trying to make sense of his current situation. Not trusting Akela, Lith silently cast detection arrays even though his fellow ranger assured him that their path was clear. Akela didn't seem smart or knowledgeable enough to be a mastermind, and his history confirmed the theory. Lith was certain they were about to walk into a trap. The question was if the vampires had fooled Akela or if he just wanted to exploit the chaos that would ensue to try and put Lith in his place. He's no awakened, there's no trace of necromancy studies in his background, and his equipment is slightly better than average for a ranger. Solus studied Akela, trying to understand how deep his involvement could be. Those vampires we killed earlier were way stronger than he is. He can't have possibly created them, nor does he have the means to control such powerful creatures. Heck, it would be enough for him to be able to use offensive light magic to become famous. If he got back in the ranger business at his age, it must be because he's desperate for attention. Solus said, "Let's wait and see." Lith replied, "If it really is an ambush, we'll spot it in advance thanks to our mystical senses." They went deeper and deeper underground until they found several traps and arrays that Akela showed Lith how to disable. Solus could already spot the 15 enemies ahead, and there was nothing out of the ordinary that could alarm her. "What is the vampire-thrall ratio?" Lith asked. "Half and half, just like before." "Don't ask me why," Solus replied. The vampires were vagrants that Dawn had captured and enslaved, but due to their strong willpower, she was having a hard time keeping them in check. That was one of the reasons why she had kidnapped people. She had forced the vampires to turn the prisoners into thralls so that she would enslave them while they still retained their weak human psyche. This way, by the time the thralls would be turned into undead, there would be no trace left of their personality. They would be reduced to mindless puppets ready to die on her whim. On top of that, Dawn could exploit the psychic bond between sire and thrall to strengthen her hold over the vampires until they had outlived their usefulness. Another reason to keep the number of undead in check was that Dawn was powerful, but far from omnipotent. Every time she generated a spawn prism, it would weaken her will and diminish her power. Spreading herself too thin would mean not only to lose her grip on the undead, but also on Akela. She couldn't afford the ranger awakening from the web of delusions she had trapped him within. Back when they had just bonded, he was hell-bent on revealing his newfound abilities to become the kingdom's champion and filthy rich in the process. It had taken her quite a lot of time and effort to discourage him. "How will you explain to them your powers without revealing my existence?" Dawn had said, "You have been a ranger long enough to know how the kingdom treats my brethren. Do you want us to end up like the Black Star? Also, what good is being a hero? Did this Verhen become rich? Did Manohar? No, the kingdom just works them to the bone, forcing them to risk their lives time and time again." Lith was actually pretty rich and could have gotten much more if he didn't suffer from his reincarnation problem. It was the reason why he had turned down the many lands and titles that had been offered to him. As for Manohar, he was indeed filthy rich and the kingdom's most wanted man at the same time, but that was another story. Yet Akela was unaware of the implications that wielding a huge power involved. He just wanted a simple solution to a complex problem, which made him as greedy as he was ruthless. Chapter 878 Master and Servant Part 2. Even if they accept me, what good is wealth if you never have the time to enjoy it? If we follow your plan, you'll die as you've lived, like a tool. If we do as I say, instead, we'll be the one on top and the royals will grovel at our feet. Dawn neglected to mention the part where she would erode his mind, take control of his body, and use everything they would be rewarded with to pursue her own personal agenda. She wasn't as naive, empathetic, and kind as Solus back when she had first met Lith. Everything the bright day had explained and taught to the ranger after they bonded came with a price. The more Akela relied on Dawn's abilities, the more she was able to manipulate his thoughts and actions. Constantly having a voice in his head and a whisper in his ears, even while he was asleep, had thinned the boundary between their personalities until Dawn had become the dominant and Akela her servant. Fusing with a cursed item meant having two minds but only one body, and the bright day wasn't willing to spend a lifetime following Akela's pipe dreams. She had a goal to achieve, just like her siblings, Red Sun and Black Knight. Their mother had entrusted to each one of them a different duty, and being the firstborn, she couldn't stand the idea that one of her siblings could beat her. Lith and Akala were placing their own arrays while an unseen Solus did the same, securing the nearest escape route. Unlike her, Dawn had been made to completely fuse with her host. The Bright Day shared with Akala both his mana signature and life force, making it impossible to distinguish her from her host. Yet Solus didn't trust the Ranger and wanted to take precautions in the case Akala wanted to use Lith as a stepping stone for his own career or the missing undead did return untimely. It took the two Rangers over half an hour to complete their task, but the final result was worth the wait. They had both centered their arrays on the undead's living quarters and laid a few others on the paths the enemies would be forced to take once the battle began. Solus kept moving on her own, unseen thanks to her mimetic abilities and her cloaking ring, searching for anything or anyone out of place. Yet she wasn't able to find any trace of a possible ambush, nor did she spot any danger. To smoke the undead out, the Rangers activated a darkness array to weaken their enemies and an earth-blocking array to leave them no way out but the doors that had been rigged as well. Everything seemed to go according to the plan, and the first 5 enemies died before being able to even scratch one of the Rangers. The arrays had been laid so to synergize their effects and amplify each other's effectiveness. Darkness whittled away the vampire's strength, while a gravity formation in front of the doors slowed down their movements and made it impossible for them to fly. Lith and Akala attacked their respective marks from behind a conjured rock trench that protected them from incoming spells, while Solus studied the situation from a vantage position in the ceiling. Suddenly, the walls of the room burst open. The vampires had learned their lesson, and instead of putting themselves in the line of fire like lambs to the slaughter, they had used their magic and physical strength to create new exits. The 10 enemies each took a different approach, flying, running, or crawling on the walls and ceiling to surround their respective target from every direction. This is bad, Solus thought, and it can easily get worse if. As if the undead had read her mind, they started shooting small focused rays of white-hot light from their fingertips. The offensive light spell was a cantrip compared to that the hybrid scaled creature had employed, but still a cantrip capable of digging centimeters deep holes into the rock. Damn my big mouth. I jinxed it. Somehow, they are all light masters. Judging by the low-tier spell they use, they can't do much without arrays. At least unless they can. Solus managed to stop thinking about hard light constructs, afraid to jinx things again. Both Rangers used the trenches to block the light rays and create improvised mazes to prevent the enemies from surrounding them. Ruin was useless against attacks that fast. Lith could use his weapon to block the rays, but at the risk of damaging the blade. Interesting, he thought. Maybe light magic doesn't split into an offensive and defensive branch just for tier 5. Maybe it has 2 different branches from the start, with holograms being its first magic. Dodging low-tiered light spells was easy for him. They could only travel in a straight line, and the glow they produced before being conjured gave away their trajectory. For a veteran mage like Lith, a lightning bolt would have been more difficult to defend against. Lightning bolts were as fast as light magic and would stun their target upon hit, whereas small light beams would inflict small, already cauterized wounds. On top of that, offensive light magic would lose power quickly with distance. I understand now why Professor Manohar only uses hard light constructs. They are much more versatile, and the mana to conjure them doesn't get wasted if the enemy dodges. My only question is how the heck can undead have light magic among their innate talents? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to use its true magic form without being awakened. Lith thought while impaling a thrall's heart with Ruin. He had decided to take down the easiest opponents first to regain some mobility in the cave's confined space. Light and darkness are the 2 sides of the same coin. Maybe the energy signature they have in common allows them to convert darkness into light and apply their innate mastery over the darkness element to light magic as well, Solus said. Solus's train of thoughts was derailed when she noticed that in the time Lith had needed to take down a single thrall, Akala had killed 2 vampires with ease. Lith was too busy fighting to notice that while his opponents used teamwork to cover each other openings to prevent Lith from delivering a deadly counter, the creatures fighting Akala were on their back foot despite their numerical advantage. The Rangers seemed to be able to predict all their movement and strategies, dodging with ease even the more sophisticated attacks. Akala was so overwhelming that for a moment Solus thought that he was fighting normal humans rather than undead. This is really odd. If Akala is such a genius fighter that he can easily deal with 5 opponents of such caliber, why did he run away from 6 of them? Sure, this time they are weakened by the erase effects, but he's so good that it doesn't make much difference. What really worries me is that his mana flow gets stronger with each enemy that gets taken down. Is it the effect of one of his relics, or what? Solus thought, unaware that it was just Dawn recovering the strength she had bestowed upon her fallen minions. She was still uncertain whether to kill Lith or just bring him back near fatally wounded. On one hand, succeed where even the mighty Ranger Verhan had failed would have given Akala a lot of fame. On the other hand, Lith's death would raise too many questions. Chapter 879 Simple Math Part 1. People might wonder how could Akala best an opponent that had managed to kill Verhan, if not even suspect him to have killed his fellow ranger with his own hands. Saving Lith's life, instead, would have given Dawn the perfect witness to her puppet's heroics. To add insult to injury, Lith would not only be forced to publicly admit his defeat, but he would also owe them a big favor. Akala was still a social outcast, whereas Lith was acquainted with all the upper echelons of the kingdom, to the point of being familiar with the royals themselves. I'm dying to steal all the secrets behind the success of such a man, and Verhan is far more valuable alive than dead. Dawn thought, while studying Lith's movements through her spawn's eyes. I've made up my mind. I'll use Verhan as a stepping stone and revel in his ruin before using one of my spawns to take control of. Her plans turned into a pile of debris in a second, along with a big portion of the south wall. The scaled hybrid came through a wall with enough strength to make the cave tremble, destabilizing the whole underground network. Die, you monster, he said while unleashing a white-hot energy beam that filled the entirety of the corridor Akala was in. The giant ray was too fast and too close to dodge it, leaving Akala no way out. You again? Both rangers said in unison, uncertain whether to be more surprised by the creature's return or by the fact that their respective partner knew the hybrid as well. Much to anyone's surprise, the undead Akala was fighting against turned around, shielding him with their bodies and using their own light magic to take the brunt of the damage. The creatures fighting Lith were torn between their instinct to protect their master and obeying her command. The inner conflict slowed them enough for Lith to kill the last thrall of the group with a palm strike that pushed her away and engulfed her body into Final Sunset's black flames. The sudden death of all the thralls and Dawn focusing on the newcomer allowed the vampires near Lith to regain their senses. The cursed item had not possessed them for long, allowing them to retain their personality. Get out, said a vampire that looked like a dandy young noble in his early 20s. Lith was so flabbergasted by how sincerely worried his enemies now looked about his well-being to stop his attack midway. I said get out. The vampire had a panicked look. All the bloodlust in the room was gone. The other ranger is possessed by the Horseman of Dawn. It's too late for us, but I'll be damned if I let go of the opportunity to screw up with her plans, even if it cost me my life. Listen to him and run, said a charming middle-aged woman while pointing at a corridor with her still extended claw. She might be back any moment, and if you strike us down, she'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Warn the kingdom. Warn the undead courts that the bright day is back. The prism in her chest released so much light to become visible underneath the heavy clothing. The white energy traveled through the undead's veins, making them bulge as it reached their brains and restored Dawn's control over their minds. Lith stepped back and raised his arm to the ceiling. He pretended to perform a hand sign to hide Solus returning on his finger. Too many things were happening at the same time, and the only thing he was certain of was that he couldn't afford to leave her behind. Akala's skin was burned to a crisp, yet he didn't seem to care much. Only a few shreds of his uniform covered the ranger's chest. His eyes, bloodshot from the heat and damage, were fixated on the scaled hybrid. Naurin, I'm so sorry. I swear, I didn't want to do it. If only your tribe would listen to me. Akala started to sob, but Naurin didn't care for his tears nor excuses. We took you in as one of our own. We saved your life and shared with you our very homes. Yet you turned on us, killed our youths, stole our treasure. and you dare to say you're sorry?" The hybrid brought his palms closer, making a small star appear between them. At the same time, the missing 15 undead came rushing from every tunnel, sealing all the way outs. "I think I'll follow Obi Vamp's advice and get out of here." Lith darted away the moment Solus was back. She had confirmed to him that the undead was telling the truth. Despite all the damage Akala had sustained, he was actually stronger than before. A white gem as big as a fist emerged from his chest. It was the purest mana crystal Lith had ever seen, and it was brighter than the sun. "That's great. Thanks for ruining my plan. Now I have to kill you all." Dawn's feminine voice replaced Akala, while the white light from her crystal mended all the wounds on Akala's body. "By my maker, that crystal bears the same energy signature that all the undead share," Solus thought while the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. "This was all a charade. We've danced in the palm of her hand until now." "Thanks, Captain Obvious," Lith replied while defending from 3 vampires at once. They were now much stronger than any undead he had ever faced. Dawn's light element provided them with more power than even ancient blood cores would hold. It was as if they were constantly feeding, even during battle, making any wound last but a second and their bodies brim with vigor. Undead didn't need to use fusion magic to become faster and stronger. Their might came from consuming the essence stored within their blood cores rather than from their bones and muscles. Yet they could still use fusion magic to further boost their already enhanced physiques. Between their prisms and fusion magic, Lith was facing 3 creatures as strong as Kalen, the ancient vampire he had met in Other. Running wasn't an option. The slightest opening would lead to his demise, let alone showing his back to such powerful opponents. "Solus, remind me to never work with another ranger anymore. They're nothing but trouble." Litha's left elbow deflected the first vampire's claws that were lunging at his head before striking at the creature's face with a darkness-infused fist that released a few Tier 3 spells on impact. Litha's right shoulder shoved away the second opponent that had come too close, sending her slamming against a wall. Then, Lith intercepted her on the rebound with a pillar of black flames emitted from his right hand that was still channeling Final Sunset. The third vampire rushed at Lith, whose front and back were exposed, only to be impaled on ruin wielded by a second right arm. 3 arms. Dawn couldn't believe her spawn's eyes, so she ignored the massive energy mass accumulating between Naurin hands and turned her head toward Lith. The third limb came out his right side and was made entirely of stone. It had a bright green gemstone on the back of its hand and 2 more bright yellow crystals, respectively near the elbow and shoulder. Lith had no reason to hold back. Everyone in the room wanted to kill him, and it was his policy to return such favors in kind. Chapter 880 Simple Math Part 2. What the heck? Lith was as surprised as Dawn, but for a different reason. The 3 death blows had actually failed to kill 2 out of 3 targets. Dawn's prisms enhanced the regenerative abilities of her spawns to the point that almost destroying their heads or hearts wasn't enough. Only Ruin had succeeded, and only because it had shattered the prism along with most of its victim's torso. The spawn turned into glass shards and released a sphere of light that returned the cursed object another portion of her strength. Most impressive. Dawn clapped her hands while another gigantic white energy mass moved towards her at subliminal speed. Lith didn't like her tone nor her calm. The spawns had yet to fully recover, so he used that opportunity to disengage and put more distance between himself and the battlefield. The bright day clicked her tongue at his paranoia, redirecting the light pillar in his direction with but a gentle slap. To not hit her minions, she focused the beam to half its size and aimed it at the middle of the corridor. The spawns shared her mind and strategy. Dawn ordered them to stick to the walls and add a few heat rays of their own. The move allowed them to dodge Naurin's spell and prevented Lith from doing the same. Did she use dominance? Litha's brain was working at full gear to find a solution. No, just mastery over the light element. The spell's energy signature still belongs to the hybrid. Solus replied. It's worth a shot then. Lith kept flying back while conjuring perfect ice crystals on his hands and boosting his orichalcum skinwalker armor with a steady flow of mana. The beam is half heat and half light. Ice can neutralize the heat and help the orichalcum to reflect the light. Silver is the most reflective across the visible spectrum, so orichalcum shouldn't do any worse. Lith thought. When the elemental energies clashed, the light pillar melted the ice until it came dangerously close to Lith's body. The temperature of both spells was solely dependent on the amount of mana their respective casters imbued them with. Nowrand had accumulated a lot of mana before unleashing his attack, but their connection was now broken, whereas Lith kept pouring mana into his own. At first, the residual ice and the orichalcum only managed to refract the light. The ever-melting and reforming ice separated the pillar into 7 different colored beams that carved deep cuts into the rock while they moved in random directions. Then, once the cold overpowered the heat, Lith managed to refocus the 7 beams into a single one by adjusting the ice crystal's shape. Nowrand and Dawn were locked into close-quarters combat, so they took the full power of the reflected pillar, but since it carried the hybrid's energy signature, only the bright day was affected by it. Nowrand had no idea where the attack came from, but he exploited the opening it had created to carve the living legacy out of the ranger's chest. Nowrand infused his long claws with the darkness and fire elements, using them to cut through the flesh while hindering the artifact's amazing recovery abilities. Unfortunately for him, between the loss of the fire element and the huge distance it had covered, the light pillar had barely a quarter of its initial strength. Dawn recovered from the surprise and shrugged off Nowrand as if he was an annoying fly. Maybe my long imprisonment made me lose my touch at genocide, but luckily, failing to kill a single Razar is a mistake I can easily fix. Dawn snapped her fingers, and another array enveloped the underground cave network along with the dimensional blocking formation. Damn, I failed again. Time to go. Nowrand the Razar had spent most of his mana for the 2 light pillars. He knew that he couldn't beat the bright day in a direct confrontation. His only option was to overpower her quickly. The tunnel's wall bent under his touch as he dove into the rock again. Retreat to fight another day was a strategy that had kept him alive for long until it didn't. The earth-blocking array Dawn had just activated cut him off from one of his most powerful means of attack, and the only escape route he had left. With dimensional magic already sealed, he was now trapped in the spawn-infested corridors. 3 of those creatures are enough to give a hard time to that Verhin guy, and he handed my ass to me. Nowrand thought, I'm between a rock and a hard place, but there is still a silver lining left. If I can get Akala to focus his efforts on Verhin, I have a concrete chance to escape. The 2 bastards are both the puppets of a living legacy. With a bit of luck, the 2 cursed objects will kill each other, and Moger will be better for it. Lith, instead, was planning to save Nowrand, but not for altruistic reasons. The Razar clearly knew both Akala and Dawn, so he was Lith's best shot at understanding what was going on. The undead had spoken of the artifact as if it was the end of the world, yet not one of the many books he had ever read made a single mention of such artifact. Solus, analysis. He thought while darting toward Dawn as fast as a bullet. The 2 undead were closely following him. Their bodies had yet to fully regenerate, so Lith was faster. Whatever the bright day is, it's not as strong as the Black Star, but still terrifying. To make matters worse, she's still not at her full power. My guess is that the bright day is a relic crafted by an undead to overcome their innate limitations and conquer the light element. It would explain why she only took thralls and undead as her spawns. The only thing I don't get is why bonding with Akala, of all people. Lith nodded and pointed his right forefinger at Akala's head. Hi, Dawn. Lith unleashed everything that was left of his final sunset upon her at point-blank range, hoping to either kill her or buy enough time to save the hybrid. By Dawn. A stream of black flames engulfed Dawn, who conjured a shield made of white light to protect her host's body. Lith was about to use the conflicting spells to cover his escape and save Nowrand, but his plan was ruined by the hybrid who slashed at both rangers before running away. The corridor Lith had come from was blocked by 2 undead, so his only choice was to move deeper into the complex and find a way to deal with the array. Guess you 2 aren't good friends either. Dawn took the blow without flinching, whereas Lith almost lost his focus to block the incoming claws with ruin. Nowrand had infused them with enough light and fire magic to make them look like laser daggers. Let me teach you a bit of math. 2 beats 1. Dawn placed her open palms behind her shield, turning it into a powerful beam of light that ate the black flames and almost managed to do the same with Lith's face. His answer was to use both hands as well to channel all the mana he could muster before it was too late. The stalemate lasted a split second before Solus gave him a literal hand. "And 3 beats too, sister." Solus noticed that the undead were upon them, so she slightly altered the spell's angle, using it as a means of propulsion rather than just attack. Chapter 881 Bad Manners Part 1. The resulting speed from Litha's flight spell plus the 2 clashing attacks allowed him to dart through the spawns and strike at Naurand with the momentum of a freight train. The hybrid spat out a mouthful of blood as his scales cracked and his bones broke. Lith had no time to play nice nor to explain his intentions to the crazed beast, so he made sure to hit his unwilling ally hard enough to make Naurand faint. The moment Dawn's reinforcements stepped on the arrays Solus had placed earlier, Solus activated the magical formations, diverting the enemy's attention from their escape. I'm starting to believe that Akala was right all along. Maybe the gods really don't want him to achieve greatness. Why is everything going wrong? Dawn thought, while the arrays fooled her into believing that more intruders were coming through the tunnels. She couldn't allow any witness to reach the surface, and since the source of the attacks came from the only way out of the underground complex, she had to deal with the newcomers first. The bright day ordered her spawns to block the tunnels leading to the upper levels while she took care of the threat, leaving only the 2 undead who were already chasing Lith after her prey. Lith regretted not having killed them sooner, but the light beam he had redirected was already weakened. If he had used it to destroy the vampires, not only would their energy have flown back to Dawn, but the beam would also have lost even more power. My bet was that with Dawn dead or incapacitated, her minions would have followed. Too bad that I failed. Solus. Final Sunset was about to run out of mana, and he couldn't waste a tier 5 spell like that again. 2 against 1 while protecting a hostage is suicidal. We've already lost the element of surprise. They know about me, and I haven't got much mana left. Bright green mana core, remember? She replied. Lith sighed, dropping Naurand as if he was a bad habit. The hybrid weighed half a ton, and the undead were moving at near sonic speed while weaving several spells at once. The vampire was so focused on her own spell that she failed to notice Litha's movements until it was too late. The living boulder met the flabbergasted undead like a windshield does a mosquito. Blood and bones splattered everywhere on the walls as the living corpse was forced to a halt. The damage she had sustained wasn't enough to kill her, but the cracks the impact had opened in her prism would cripple the vampire's strength until she made a full recovery. That was mean but effective. One-on-one is much better, Solus thought. Lith infused the skinwalker armor with his mana, turning himself into an orichalcum block before stopping abruptly. The remaining undead was expecting something like that, so he slowed down and dodged Lith, blocking the corridor ahead. The enemy is trapped. I need backup to prevent them from escaping AG. The mind link between Dawn and her spawn was abruptly cut off as the prism inside his chest shattered. Along with his power, Dawn retrieved the images about his final moments as well. She discovered that when her servant had surpassed Lith, the third stone arm had struck like a scorpion's tail from the blind spot that the ranger's metal body created. The red blade of ruin had merely grazed its target, but at such speed, it had been enough. The only silver lining was that Dawn had gotten a good look at Solus. Once metallized, the skinwalker armor had no mantle anymore, and this time there was no spell blinding her life vision. That's no artifact, but a member of the family. Objects don't have a life force. Bright Day was flabbergasted. Her surprise turned into outrage when Lith executed the remaining helpless spawn. That's it. Family or not. I'm going to beat them an inch from death before I let them explain the secret of their success to me. I heard that Verhen found a big important ODI ruin, so maybe he had access to the research I'm looking for. If they play their cards right, once I'm finished with my dear cousin, I'll give them a painless death. Cursed objects used the term family only because they lacked an alternative. Living legacies were no race, since each one of them was unique. Not even being crafted by the same hand gave them any sense of kinship. Dawn and her siblings had tried multiple times to kill each other, so she was quite an expert at dealing with cursed items. I wish that all undead had such a blatant weak point. Sure, Dawn's prisms give the vampires a lot of extra powers, but I only need one good shot to take them out. Lith thought. The problem is, what do we do now? Naurand was badly hurt, so Lith healed him enough to make sure that the hybrid would survive, while keeping his stamina low to prevent him from regaining consciousness. No warping, no digging, and all our communication amulets are disabled. I've already tried everything I could, but even though it's old and patched up, the ODI array does its job. We should get some distance between us and Akala. We need to rest before looking for a way out, or at least I do. I'm beat. Solus replied. Agreed. The ODI would often set up multiple exits to their complexes, so we have two options. Find an emergency exit or one of the array's nodes and disable it. To fix them, Dawn needed to have access to their focal points, so they must be around here. Lith lifted Nowrand over his shoulders and resumed flying. He followed the world energy flowing through the walls until he found what he was looking for. Bingo! Knowing the ODI's modus operandi and how two arrays of this magnitude managed to resist the passing of time without any maintenance, I knew there had to be a mana geyser somewhere. Lith thought. It's not at full capacity. Solus studied the geyser and how part of its energy was being siphoned. It was missing way more world energy than that needed to sustain just two arrays, but it was still more than enough to assume her tower form. The arrays prevent me from warping and digging while the ceiling is too low to materialize even the first floor. The ground floor alone will have to do. I don't trust much your light bending skills against a light master, but it's our best shot. Lith walked inside the tower, bringing Nowrand with him. It always amazed him how much bigger it was on the inside. I wonder how come you can't warp, but you can still bend space inside of here. You can't dig into the ground, but you still manage to enlarge the door for him. Lith said, Because it's my body, dummy. Just like the Earth blocking array can't stop your Earth fusion, it can't stop me either. Inside the tower, I make the rules. Solus has appeared in her human form. This time, she wasn't wearing a dress, but her own skinwalker armor that was shaped to mimic Lith's uniform. As long as she was on the tower's premises, she could do much more than just provide intelligence. Chapter 882 Bad Manners Part 2. Lith had prepared contingency plans in the case his tower was ever discovered, and the spare armor was part of it. He prepared the table for three, bringing out some food from his pocket dimension. Lith didn't even use invigoration to save it for later. Within the tower, his recovery abilities were enhanced to the point that a short nap would allow him to return to his peak condition. Please allow me. I don't get many occasions to practice invigoration on someone else, Solus said while waking up their guest. She was curious to study a hybrid who had 2 mana cores, so while she was performing the healing, Solus also activated the Tier 5 spell, Scanner. She discovered that, like Lith, the creature had 2 life forces. The main difference between the 2 hybrids was that in Lith's case his life forces were linked, growing stronger together every time he experienced a breakthrough. Also, the barrier separating them seemed to exist only to protect his human body from the excessive strain that the other form would cause him. She was certain that the barrier would disappear as soon as Lith became powerful enough to handle the energy that the combined bodies would possess. In Nowrand's case, instead, despite him being in his late 20s, the 2 life forces were completely isolated from each other by an airtight barrier that prevented any energy exchange. That, coupled with the 2 mana cores, gave Lith and Solus the impression of being in front of 2 beings that had somehow been forcefully merged into one. There weren't 2 sides of the same coin so much as 2 coins glued together. The moment Nowrand awoke, he tried to stand up, but a gentle hand forced him to sit. Relax. You're safe here, Solus said, wearing her best smile. Seeing a being made of light, however, was the most terrifying thing that Nowrand could imagine. His response to the perceived threat was to stand up with all of his might while striking at the creature's heart with his razor-sharp claws. It was the place where Dawn usually hid within her current host. Solus slapped away the clawed hand with a grace that painfully reminded both men of Dawn and kept pressing on his scaly shoulder, locking the Razar into place. The hybrid weighed half a ton, but in her tower form, Solus's weight reached the dozens. The attempt to overpowering her hand made him feel small and foolish, as if he had tried to uproot a mountain. She said, Relax. If we wanted you dead, you'd have stopped breathing a long time ago. Lith had a smug grin on his face. He was curious to see how Solus would handle their guest and how powerful she truly was. Nowrand had already proven to be aware of her existence and to somehow be able to trace living legacies like Solus. Hiding her from him was pointless, whereas having a hostile within the tower was a nice experiment. Solus couldn't harm Lith. She wouldn't lift a finger against Tista or Nika, and Zinya's husband wasn't worthy of being considered a test subject more than a cockroach would. Believe me, there are things worse than death. The puppet of a cursed object such as yourself should know better, the hybrid said while panic made his heart drum into his ears. Naurend conjured a small sphere of light out of one of his claws that instantly turned into a white-hot beam aimed at Solus's forehead. That's rude. She snuffed out the light with a flick of her wrist. With the same movement, she also slapped Naurend with so much strength that his jaw almost dislocated. Who are you and who is that woman called Dawn? Lith was about to say thing when Solus had glared at him. Naurend coughed out a mouthful of blood and attempted to cast an earth spell to crush Solus with the stones of the pavement. Unfortunately for him, every single piece of the tower was part of her, so his spell found nothing to work on. A backhand slap came close to twisting his neck, yet he refused to back down, conjuring one element after the other. Each failure was rewarded with another slap, until his spirit was as broken as his body. Lith had been forced to move the table away during the slaughter to protect the food. I didn't pay and preserve all this stuff all this time just to get it spoiled by blood, he thought. You are half human, so let's behave at least as half-civilized people. My name is Scourge. Who are you? Lith asked. Naurend attempted to talk, but only jumbled sounds came out. He was suffering from multiple concussions, and his jaw was shattered into more pieces than a puzzle. Ops. My bad. I'm not used to be the one doing the beating. I thought with all those scales he would be sturdier. Solus fixed the Razar again with invigoration, but not even the breathing technique could restore his warrior's pride. Naurend was aware that physical appearance meant nothing when facing a cursed object, but Solus was so lithe and petite that being handled by her, as if he was just a stuffed toy, crushed his morale. My name is Naurend. His voice was dejected, and he couldn't muster the strength to stop staring at the floor. Nice to meet you, Naurend. I'm Solus. She held out her hand, almost triggering him into a panic attack the moment he laid his eyes on it. Solus, what point does using an alias have if you give out your real name? Lith expressed his grievance via their mind link. Also, do you realize how scary your hand is to him right now? You might as well point a blade at his neck, and he would feel more at ease. Who cares about my name? You gave it to me, so even if Naurend knew how Master Menadion called me, he wouldn't be able to recognize me. She replied, trying to avoid talking about her blunder. You're right about me. I'm only half human. Naurend hurried to say, terrified at the idea of being slapped again. I belong to those you humans call the were-people. Like a werewolf. Lith was honestly surprised. He had read about were-people only in storybooks, and according to lore, only carnivores could infect men with their animal spirit. Yet the creature in front of him closely resembled an armadillo. Yes, except the full moon does squat. We're not afraid of silver, and our condition is no curse. It's man-made. Naurend's voice found courage in his heritage. The only thing he hated more than Akala was bigotry. Really? Then why is your race listed among monsters? Lith asked. We're not a fallen race. We are no race at all. Were-people were born out of experiments with forbidden magic in the attempt to create soldiers capable of using magic without training, as it happens for magical beasts. Naurend couldn't hide his contempt for such a foolish theory. Magical beasts have a natural affinity toward elemental magic, but that's it. They have to work their asses off to become good mages. Lith replied, You're telling me. Naurend chuckled. Why do you think the project was dropped? The final result was an utter failure. Those who survived the procedure were capable of shape-shifting into an emperor beast, but apparently they shared no magical ability with their animal counterpart. Emphasis on apparently. Lith said, Chapter 883 Evil Light Part 1. Oh yes, my ancestors could use all elements like humans and cast all kinds of spells silently like beasts. What they lacked was the animal's affinity for magic and the human's training, so the experiment was an apparent failure. Imagine their captors' amazement once my ancestors realized that first magic was just the beginning. When they broke out of their filth-ridden cells, drank the blood of those arrogant mages to quench their thirst, and then feasted upon the arrogant nobles' families who had commissioned the job. Naurend's pupils turned bright red in a blood frenzy, as if he could see the entire scene unfolding in front of his eyes, and he was eager to join his kinsmen. Once they achieved their revenge, my ancestors tried to live among the beasts, but because of our human mind, their society was hard to cope with. On top of that, our reproductive preferences remain unchanged, no matter the nature of our animal half. Living among humans turned out to be impossible as well. My ancestors had to hide their magical talents at all times, but it wasn't our hubris driving us away from civilization, it was fear. Fear of being discovered, of being subject to those experiments again. Adults can hide their abilities, but kids are hard to handle, while newborns. Naurin shook his head. I know. They can be born in animal form and shapeshift according to their stress levels. Lith dismissed the thing with a wave of his hand. I'm not interested in a history lesson so much as in understanding our present situation. Get to the point. Do you think I enjoy revealing my heritage to someone like you? I'm only doing it because your master is strong. Maybe strong enough to capture Dawn. I'm betting on the monster I don't know only because my hatred beats all reason. You need to know this stuff, so in the case you beat the bright day, you'll be able to make contact with my people who know how to contain her. You can't store her in a dimensional space, you can't destroy her, and entrusting her to anyone else would be utter madness. Naurin assumed he would die the moment he outlived his usefulness. Do I look like a servant to you? Lith released his aura, enveloping the entirety of the dining room in blue light. There was no hostility in his voice nor killing intent in his mana, just pure, unbridled power. Solus wasn't the only one benefiting from the tower. World energy endlessly flowed inside Lith, turning his aura into a raging ocean. Solus is not my master, she is my partner, Lith said. Even though Lith wasn't moving, Naurin felt as if the ground was collapsing under his seat, while his host grew in size until he was a giant. After spending years watching after the bright day, the hybrid could discern the energy coming from a cursed object from that of its host. The moment Naurin realized that Lith wasn't lying, that all that power belonged to him and didn't come from Solus, the Razar's mind went blank in confusion. Now continue with your story. Lith recalled his aura, and the world went back to normal. Naurin could finally breathe again. The feeling of oppression that had been weighing on his chest was gone. We withdrew from the world, taking for us special places of Mogar where we could live in peace. We wanted to find a way to remove the duality in our nature, to succeed where our makers had failed. Our species is cut off from Mogar. We don't belong to any of the four races, nor can we awaken. We're not monsters, yet what was done to our forefathers prevents us from achieving any form of further evolution. We're stuck as we are. Our condition has only one perk. We can't bond with a cursed object because we're already fused with our animal half. We have 2 mana cores and 2 life forces, while a cursed object can only bond with one of them. Throughout history, when a living legacy couldn't be contained nor destroyed, it was entrusted to one of our clans for safekeeping. That's how I know Dawn. She's one of Baba Yaga's horsemen. Naurin said. Lith knew that name. It was often mentioned in the fairy tales that his parents told him when he was little on Mogar. Unlike her Earth's counterpart, Mogar's Baba Yaga wasn't a seemingly omnipotent old witch who lived in a chicken-legged hut. She was considered to be the first person to have discovered magic, and according to lore she had achieved immortality. Her story, however, wasn't told to inspire children, but as a cautionary tale. In her greed for power, Baba Yaga had isolated herself for so long that once she came out from her hut, Mogar was changed and everyone she had known and loved was dust. She was unable to relate to the new society. Even the language was unknown to her. She worked hard to adapt, to learn about the world, and to fall in love again. But while everything changed and died, she remained the same. Baba Yaga's children inherited her talent for magic, but not her longevity. No matter what she did to prolong their life, death would always claim them. Mad with grief and desperation, she devoted her efforts to give birth to a new race of creatures that could live as long as she did, to save her from loneliness. It was thanks to Baba Yaga that the first undead had walked Mogar. One of what? Lith asked. In all the stories he knew, Baba Yaga was considered the mother of all undead, the one behind all the bad things that lurked in the dark. There was no mention of horsemen. Undeath is imperfect. Baba Yaga's children have too many weak points, so she crafted the horsemen to continue her research while she keeps improving her strength before making a new attempt at creating a better race. Naurin replied. Undead are weak to sunlight, but those who merge with Dawn share her mastery above the light element and become immune to it. But that's not her mission. She was sent out on Mogar to perfect the undead's feeding method. As you should know, with each life they take, the undead becomes stronger, but that's it. When an undead feeds upon his prey, he absorbs the victim's life essence, which contains more than just mana. It also holds all of their memories and abilities. Luckily for the living, such knowledge is lost during the feeding process. In Dawn's case, however, whenever she bonds with her host or does she create a spawn, she inherits the entirety of their being. The creatures we've fought so far were strong because they shared all of their abilities with each other and were guided by an ancient being who can use any skill to its fullest. Are you telling me that if Dawn bonds with a sword master, she acquires their swordsmanship and that each spawn adds new skills to her collection? Lith finally found a common link between the victims of disappearance. It wasn't the caravan's cargo Dawn was after, but the people who possessed special knowledge. He asked Solis to start compiling a list of what she could do if such people became their obedient slaves while he kept conversing with Naurant. Chapter 884 Evil Light Part 2. Yes, she does. Yet like any other children of Baba Yaga, Dawn is imperfect as well. The hybrid replied. The moment a spawn dies, she loses access to their abilities and knowledge except for the bits she has spent time practicing. Otherwise, with her eternal life, she would have already become nigh omnipotent. Dawn is the incarnation of the undead's feeding flaw, and her mission is to find a fix to it. If she ever succeeds, the undead will become unstoppable. That's why she's after the ODI ruins. Lith thought. The ODI were body snatchers, but their procedure was imperfect as well. The new body would not inherit the original's mana core nor their muscle memory. I bet Dawn is after their research about memory transfer, and that's what that odd machine is about. She's trying to apply to ODI technology on herself before adapting it to the rest of the undead. How did Akala came into play? Lith asked. Dawn can't be destroyed. She feeds upon the light element, so even locking her in a cave is pointless. Naurant said. Yet like her maker, she suffers from isolation. Given time, my tribe exchanged our company for her knowledge about all kinds of light magic. We hoped that body sculpting would help us find a way to merge our twin essences, that we could put her skills to good use. We never succeeded, but over time, our skill with healing magic became legendary. People would seek our village to fix what was wrong with their bodies, their minds, or even their souls. They believed us to be heavenly creatures, but there's only so much we could do for them. Akala is among the few that managed to find our village. He was at the lowest point of his life, to the point that salvation and death were equally charming to him. Akala told us how he had slaved away for his masters until they had thrown him out once he was no longer deemed useful. Now I know that his side of the story was twisted, but his pain was genuine. We felt empathy for his situation, and we did all we could to prevent him from throwing away his life. Like many before him, Akala found peace among us and decided to remain. He was a good man and a powerful mage, so we accepted him as one of our own. Akala even took one of our women as his wife, and that was the beginning of the end. Our skills reminded him of someone called Manohar, one of the most powerful men in your kingdom. He asked us to teach him the art of shaping light, but we know nothing about human magic, and he proved to be incapable of learning the way we do. Yeah, that would require him to be awakened. Lith thought. As long as Akala was our guest and lived at the fringes of our community, he knew no envy. Yet once he got married, watching so many marvels, watching so much power wielded even by children while he was stuck with his primitive ways made him bitter. Naurant said. He started to live it as another injustice. As if every time we practiced our magic, we reminded him of how insignificant he was. We were worried by him spending so much time alone in the forest, but only because we thought he might commit suicide. Dawn was locked inside a chest, hidden in our chieftain's house, and protected by several arrays we inherited from our ancestors. We had no idea at the time that just like we learned from her, she had learned from us. Even from within her prison, Dawn used her mastery over the light element to see everything that happened inside the village and learn our personal spells. She also managed to discover the passwords for the arrays and how the chest's lock worked. Wait, how could you be so stupid to not use a light blocking array against her? Lith asked. We did, but it wasn't enough. Naurin clawed his own legs in frustration. You don't get it. Dawn doesn't feed upon light magic, but on the light element itself. Hide her inside a cave, bury her in a marine trench, it doesn't matter. The only way to fully stop her would be to destroy the sun. I'm sorry, but I still fail to see how Akala could help her. It seems to me you had everything under control. Lith said. So did we, and we were wrong. Dawn had already tried to free herself from the arrays in the past, but she always failed. We believed that our teamwork, our relentless preparations were the reason for our success. But the truth was that Dawn was just probing our ranks. It had never been us or the arrays to keep her from leaving. It was the lack of a suitable host. Someone so crazy and desperate to bond with her, even though he knew what she was. Without a host, she could exert less than half her full strength. That along with the passwords for the arrays was enough to escape from her prison, but not enough to get away from the village. With our numbers, it would have been only a matter of time before we captured her again. Dawn only had one chance, because once she revealed her hand, we would have changed the codes often to foil further attempts. Sadly, a single mistake was also our last. Dawn deactivated the arrays, burst through our ranks, and reached Akala. We had failed to understand that what he looked for wasn't a family, a place where he belonged, or even acceptance. The only thing Akala wanted was what he believed that Mogar owed him. Once he bonded with Dawn, he absorbed so much light energy that he blotted out the sun, and then he burned the whole village to make sure that no one would live to tell the tale. I survived the massacre only because I was on the front lines when it happened. Naurin started to sob. I beg your pardon? Lith asked. The hybrid's words made no sense to him. After Dawn deactivated the arrays, I was part of the guards that took the full power of her first attack. I was too severely injured to be of help, so I blinked away to heal and avoid becoming a hostage. I watched the whole thing from a distance, and when Akala bonded with Dawn, I know everything was lost. I tried to blink back to the village to save as many people as I could, but without light element, there's no dimensional magic. The only thing I could do was fly away and curse my own weakness. You can easily imagine the rest. Have you tried warning the kingdom? Lith put the table back in place. His hospitality surprised Naurin, but at that point, the hybrid didn't care about anything but his own hunger. And tell them what? That a decorated ranger had stolen a legendary artifact from a tribe of monsters? Don't your people give a medal to those who commit such crimes? Naurin wolfed down the food the moment he shape-shifted into his human form. His stark, naked human form. Chapter 885 Elemental Arrays Part 1. Naurin was a man in his mid-20s, about 1.84 meters, 6 foot, tall, with a lean and toned body that no one in their right mind would associate with his hulking animal form. He had raven black hair, green eyes, and an unkempt beard. His bronze skin was a clear sign that he wasn't from the Gorgon Empire nor from the north of the kingdom. Oh my! Solus blushed, and with her all the lights in the tower. I guess you are right, Naurin. Alerting the kingdom would have been pointless. Lith nodded. Whether they believed your story or not, you'd have ended up as a lab rat. As for Akala, even if they decided to kill him instead of exploiting his skills, Dawn would have simply moved to the next moron. Now that you know everything, do I get a last wish after my last meal? Naurin asked. How many times do I have to tell you that wanton murder is not part of my plan? Lith emitted a stressed sigh. The plan is to avoid useless fights, contact the Beast Council, and have them deal with this mess. What? Naurin couldn't believe his own ears. He had noticed that Lith was capable of using first magic during their earlier confrontation, but he thought that just like Akala, his abilities originated from his bond with the cursed object. Are you really part of the Beast Council? I am. I also guess it was them entrusting your tribe with the relic. Lith said. That was centuries ago. We had no contact with the council ever since. Otherwise, I would have asked for their help instead of acting solo. Naurin said. Get some rest while you can. Dawn spawns could find us any minute now, and I've no idea how to get out of here. Worst case scenario, we'll have to fight our way out. Lith sent the sentries to patrol the area. They would warn him as soon as the enemy approached, giving him the time to make preparations. You don't need my help. Her powers rival those of the bright day. Naurin pointed at Solus, who was trying to eat while avoiding to look at their naked guest. The hybrid didn't believe in free meals, and the whole situation still made no sense to him. I wish it was that simple. Lith said. We are against at least 15 spawns plus Akala. Do you know about a weak spot we could exploit? Dawn has no weak point. Naurin shook his head. But if you really want to escape, there's a tunnel in the lower levels that leads outside. Are you sure? Lith asked. Absolutely. I investigated the area earlier while I was trying to understand Dawn's endgame. It was my plan B in the case I failed to kill her host. Destroy everything she is working on and then bury her under the whole mountain. Naurin replied. He told Lith about an ancient underground lab that the living legacy had worked hard to restore to its full functionality. According to him, there were a lot of tomes and a machine. The only reason I didn't touch anything was to not lose the element of surprise. A lab, you say? We should pay it a visit before leaving. Lith gave Naurin some of his old clothes. The hybrid was less muscular and taller than Lith, so their size was a bit off. Just a couple of questions before letting you catch some sleep. How can the undead possessed by Dawn survive sunlight? And what can you tell me about her siblings? It's easy. It's the abundance of the light element during the day that forces most undead to sleep. All Dawn has to do is to absorb the light in their surroundings to create an artificial night. Naurin replied. As for her siblings, I know only what legends say. The Black Knight's mission is to find a way to make the undead immune to darkness magic, while the Red Sun's is to restore the undead's ability to use all kinds of magic. As it is, they can't become Forge Masters nor Dimensional Mages. What about Liches? Lith asked. They are not children of Baba Yaga. They are a man-made perversion of undeath. Dawn and her siblings are known as the Bane of Liches, not only because the three horsemen consider them unnatural, but also because Liches make a mockery of what they consider their secret mission. Every time a horseman meets a Lich, the latter dies. Sometimes even for good. Naurin sighed. Even though he was certain that one of the cursed objects would be the death of him, he wasn't afraid, just sad. Part of it depended on the awareness that he wouldn't achieve his revenge, but mostly because he realized how foolish he had been. Ever since the destruction of his village, Naurin had never reverted to his human form for long, letting his grief and animal fury drive his actions. Now, however, he realized that he had been fighting a losing battle all along. Even if I managed to kill Akala, then what? I can't build alone the arrays to contain Dawn, nor would she give me the time to reach another tribe of Were people. She would just kill me and then find a new partner. Gods, I'm so stupid. Naurin thought. To add insult to injury, even though he was surrounded by enemies, finally being able to hear a human voice that wasn't his own, eating hot food, and wearing clothes were pleasant feelings he had almost forgotten. They reminded him of his home, of all the people he had loved and lost. Soon his nostalgia turned into hatred, but this time, instead of giving him strength, his rage only made him feel helpless. I'm sorry for your loss, Solus said while conjuring a bed for their guest. Killing Akala will not bring anyone back, but I hope that at least it will give you closure. Naurin was shocked by the cursed object's kindness. He considered Solus an enemy and wouldn't hesitate a second to kill her or her human host. Even in his human form, the hybrid could smell the subtle scent that only a living legacy could emit, and it made him sick. His face turned red from anger, and he was about to lash out at her when he felt a cold gaze piercing his neck. Naurin turned around, meeting Litha's eyes that were brimming with blue mana. Say thank you and get to sleep. The coldness of Litha's voice smothered Naurin's rage, reminding him that his life was hanging by a thread. Thank you, Solus. The hybrid fell asleep the moment his head touched the soft pillow. All of his inner turmoil crumbled in the face of the exhaustion he had accumulated during the months spent hunting Akala. What are we going to do with him? Solus asked. It depends on how useful he's willing to be. First, we need to get out of here alive. We are currently outnumbered, but not outmatched. No matter how strong a cursed object is, we've learned from the Black Star that once they bond with someone, the host is their weak point. If we kill Akala, Dawn will lose most of her strength, and that should create an opening for our escape. If by then Naurin is still alive and willing to teach us offensive light magic, I might consider letting him live. Lith replied. Chapter 886 Elemental Arrays Part 2. What I'm really interested in, however, is to find out what the ODI researched in this facility. If Naurin's story is true, we might find clues about how to solve the problem I would have in common with the undead if I ever decide to body swap. Retaining my own physical skills and mana core is no small matter. Maybe this mess is actually a blessing in disguise. Our only issue is to get rid of Dawn and seize everything relevant before the kingdom searches the lab. Lith used the tower sentries to scout their surroundings and search for secret passages while keeping an eye on the enemy. Dawn's spawns were taking it easy, checking every nook and cranny for their prey before moving forward. The Bright Day believed that after interrogating Naurand, Lith would have killed him since it was what she would have done. Breaking Naurand should take Lith enough time for me to find him. Even if somehow that dumb hybrid knows about the exit and reveals its position to the ranger, the traps I've left behind will make short work of the other cursed object's human host, leaving them helpless. Without a body or an energy source, the lesser members of the family are unable to move. I want to learn who they are and what they know before turning them to the kingdom. I have now the perfect scapegoat to make up for this mess. Dawn had a smug grin at the idea of dooming Solus to a fate worse than death. No matter what they tell the humans, no one will ever believe a word they say. A couple of hours later, Lith woke up Naurand and they left the cave. The enemies were getting closer, and Lith wanted to keep enough lead to always have the time to check his surroundings. Naurand was forced to take point because Lith didn't trust the hybrid. Yet he couldn't afford to dispose of such a precious asset. Naurand's clan had learned from Dawn everything they knew, so he could offer Lith insight about the enemy's strategies. Baba Yaga's horsemen are different from anything else you might have faced before. Naurand said, "They are smart, powerful, but most of all they are immortal. No one has ever managed to destroy one of them, yet they are not conceited. Dawn has never underestimated her enemies and always takes her time before making a move. You have only two advantages over her. First, she's in competition with her siblings, so after being trapped for centuries, she must be in a rush to make up for the lost time. Otherwise, I can't explain why she kept that dirty poor ranger instead of swapping him for someone more influential." Lith had trouble keeping his poker face intact. Naurand's ignorance about society was baffling. Dawn made the best possible move. If she picked someone like Martianus Distar, I doubt that it would have been easy to corrupt her as Dawn did to Akala. A powerful mage would never trust a sentient, unknown artifact. Also, the Martianus has a family and a truckload of responsibilities. Any odd behavior wouldn't have gone unnoticed, and Dawn would have wasted most of her time filling paperwork just not to betray her presence. Akala, instead, is a blank slate. The only thing Naurand is right about is Dawn being in a rush. There's no other way to explain why she wants to lead the kingdom to these ruins. ODI remains have been declared state secrets, hence discovering one is bound to boost Akala's status and give Dawn access to most of the rare ingredients she needs for her research. Sure, she'd lose any piece of knowledge she has overlooked, but the ODI also offer her the perfect explanation for the presence of the odd undead Akala has allegedly discovered. Lith thought, "Your second advantage is me." Naurand waved his hand, revealing the presence of several arrays that covered most of the corridor in front of them. Lith had already spotted the traps with life vision, but he wanted to check the hybrid's skills and how trustworthy he was. "How did you know about their presence, and how can such powerful formations remain active even without mana crystals to fuel them?" Lith asked. "I can sense the unbalance in the elements that this kind of arrays create. As for their power source, there's your explanation." Naurand pointed his finger at several runes that were unknown to Lith. On top of that, once he and Solus started to study the array's composition, they noticed that the runes Naurand highlighted had no sense, occupying the empty spaces between the magic circles. Normal arrays are comprised of all elements, and their effects depend on the runes they are inscribed with. The Razar said, "Elemental arrays, instead, are forged out of a single element. They are less versatile in their use, but at the same time, they are easier to sustain. Those runes are actually power foci for Dawn's mana. She can keep them active as long as she provides them regularly with light energy. Fuck me sideways. That's probably the reason why both Zedros and his son are so skilled as wardens. I wonder if it's something exclusive to light magic or if all elements can do the same." Lith thought, "Do you know how to deactivate them?" He actually said, "Yes. These are arrays that my people developed based on Dawn's teachings." Even though Naurand was focused on prolonging his life until he found a way to escape, he couldn't hide the bitterness in his voice. In his eyes, by using his people's magic for her own ends, Dawn was tainting all the good memories Naurand had of them. He waved his hand again, making several runes move out of their place without disrupting the formation. What the fuck? Lith blurted out. If I deactivated the arrays, she would notice just as if I triggered them. This way I have just blocked their mana flow. We can pass the formations without alarming Dawn, nor leaving any trace of our passage. Naurin stepped inside the array, yet nothing happened. The missing runes prevented it from activating without losing its structural integrity. We used this kind of elemental formations to protect our village from outsiders. They are not as good as permanent arrays, but they have no maintenance cost and are safe for children. Even those with no talent for magic can deactivate them with first magic as long as they know what runes have to be moved. Lith followed him closely, leaving to Solus to remember the sequence of gestures necessary to alter the arrays while he kept an eye on their surroundings. The stone corridors were filled with metal plaques that pointed them the way, but also reminded him of the horrors of Kulla. When the stone was replaced by metal, a cold shiver ran down Lith's back. Damn, if I meet a single golem, I swear to Newton that I'll desert the army. Lith's worries were dispelled a few steps later when he noticed that the artificial lights didn't work and that the entire place had been ravaged by time. The metal was completely rusted, alternating green and red patches that screeched at their passage. The humidity had formed small pools of water from which mold had spread to the seams between the metal plates. Lith channeled invigoration through the mold, using it as a conduit for his breathing technique and examining the full floor before even taking the first step. Chapter 887 Mother Lode Part 1. Lith was surprised when invigoration traveled through the moss and revealed to him that countless mana crystals nucleated from the cracks in the rocks underlying the rusted metal walls. The crystal vein followed the path of the mana geyser that they had previously encountered. Both Kulla and the ruins Lith was currently exploring had been crystal mines in the past. Unlike the resting place of the last members of the ODI race, the ruins had to have been abandoned for centuries. Mana crystals took a long time to form, and judging by their vitality, nothing had interfered with their sustenance in a long while. Another surprise was the complete lack of defense systems, be them ancient or modern in making. Why are there no arrays here? Lithis thought out loud, receiving an unexpected answer. Never cast any kind of spell near growing crystals. Naurin pointed at the closest crystal vein. They are hungry for world energy, and if you mess with their meal, your magic will go wild. If you are lucky. What if you are unlucky? Naurin quickly closed and opened his hands while mouthing a boom. How can you perceive the crystals through all this metal? I don't. I stumbled upon several crystal veins while swimming through the mountain. Nothing useful for at least 300 more years. Lith had still many questions, but their words echoed like thunder and hushing the zone wasn't an option. I guess that's how his people dug their share of crystals. I bet that if the kingdom knew about their skill, swimming through the earth would be added to the list of forbidden magic. He thought. After walking together for a while, Naurin had stopped worrying about Solus. He looked at Lith from time to time, trying to understand who the real monster was. The cursed object had shown empathy and compassion while he had recounted his story, whereas her host seemed to be more interested in the ODI library than worried by the ancient horror that was stalking them. Their descent continued for hours. Neither of them needed light, so they advanced in silence and stopped only for a quick meal or to drink some water. Before leaving the tower, Lith had taken more food out of his pocket dimension to replace the bag he had lost. Hunger was the worst enemy for a mage since water could be easily conjured whereas food couldn't. To make matters worse, a starving mage couldn't even heal their wounds without hastening their own demise. Not to jinx our mission, but what makes you think that we'll find the tomes we need still in place? If I were Dawn, I would store them inside my pocket dimension and always bring them with me. Solus said. True, but you must also consider that she has no Soluspedia. Dawn needs to constantly consult the books, and with the dimensional blocking array in place, her options are even more limited. Lith replied. Turning off such a big formation without severing its link with the mana geyser that serves as a power source is almost impossible, especially since she had to patch up what remained of the ODI array. Also, you have to consider how it was probably Dawn who destroyed the tags leading to the underground facility. My guess is that, whatever she is building in these caves, it needs the mana geyser to work. When you assumed your tower form, you told me the geyser wasn't at full capacity, remember? 2 arrays are nothing compared to the flow of world energy. My guess is that she planned on using the ODI lab until Akala got a place and a mana geyser of his own. She never expected that we would escape from her trap, nor that we would have a guide. Without Naurand, we would be wandering aimlessly instead of moving straight toward her lab. The real problem will be taking everything we need outside before dawn or her spawns catch up with us. Maybe, and maybe not. Solus didn't want to put Litha's hopes up, but she could feel they were getting closer again to the mana geyser they had accessed earlier. Most of the world energy ran through the mountain, forming the crystal veins. Without an access point, the mana geyser was useless for their purposes. But if they found another opening, then all books could have been stored inside the pocket dimension after moving them inside the tower. Litha's stomach told him that it was about dinner time. That and Naurand stumbling more and more frequently made Lith decide it was better to take a break. They had been walking for hours, and he was the only one with an enhanced body. Lith was still as fresh as a daisy, whereas Naurand was drenched with sweat and panted like a steam engine. His human body was suffering from hunger and exhaustion. He had survived the last few months by eating bugs, fruits, and rarely some fish, which had further weakened him. By watching at Naurand's battered body and how voracious he had been during their shared meal inside the tower, Lith guessed that had been the first real food the Razar had eaten since the destruction of his village. Lith needed to plan their next move with Naurand, hence they needed to talk. After checking with all of his senses that there were no enemies nor crystal veins, he conjured a hush spell and gave the hybrid a big ration of food. Naurand sat in the less dirty spot he could find and devoted his full focus to make sure that not a crumb would be lost. I'm surprised. You have yet to make a single attempt to escape. What? Lith asked. I can't warp, I can't dig through stone, and I'm pretty sure that even if I managed to get the drop on you, I wouldn't come out unscathed. Also, the commotion would alarm Dawn and her flunkies. I'm no match for her one-on-one, let alone if I'm put against 15 spawns. Naurand replied. That was going to be my next question. I noticed that you have got good spells, but you fight inefficiently. You invest too much mana in a single attack, leaving you exposed whenever it misses. What do you expect from me? Naurand asked and received seconds. The lack of mockery in his tone was the closest thing to a thank you that his hate for cursed objects allowed him to give Lith. I'm no warrior. I lived all my life in my village as a healer and making sure that the bright day wouldn't escape. Gods, how I missed meat. I never had the time to field dress animals. Then I guess you don't know how to use a weapon. Lith had an unimprinted short sword with him. He had taken it from the tower to give it to Naurand in the case the enemies caught up with them. What good is a weapon against an artifact? Naurand shrugged. I never learned how to use a blade because I never thought I would need one. This isn't how I planned my life. Can you take on her spawns while I deal with Dawn? Lith asked. Alone against 15 hive-minded individuals who share part of her power and all of their skills? No way. I can kill a couple if I manage to take them by surprise. Maybe 3. 15 is madness. Naurand shook his head. Chapter 888 Motherlode Part 2. They didn't seem so strong when we fought them. Lith thought. Probably they were holding back, to lull you into a sense of false security and keep you from escaping. You instead went all out and killed them all before they had a chance to retaliate. Solus pointed out. As for the second wave we faced, we got the upper hand again, but only because they weren't aware of my existence. Their teamwork was seamless, and their plan would have worked if you didn't have a third arm. Wait a second, Lith said to both his allies. How long has Dawn been fused with Akala? 5 months, 16 days, and 6 hours, more or less. Naurand gritted his teeth as the memory of his village burning at noon, when Dawn's strength was at her peak, flashed in front of his eyes. And how long has she been sealed by your people? A couple of centuries. Lady Sinmara, one of Overlord Salark's daughters, brought the bright day to us after she failed to destroy it. Her mother. I didn't ask you for a history lesson. Lith cut him short. We are on the clock, so shut up and listen. I might have found Dawn's weak point. Her knowledge about modern magic is limited to what Akala knows. That's why she kidnapped those people. Caravans always bring bodyguards, and the best bodyguards are always mages. You told me that she doesn't retain the knowledge of her victims after they die. So if we take out her spawns before she gets to us, she'll be much easier to handle. Lith pondered if to take out the undead or the thralls first. The vampires were bound to have a lot more knowledge, but they were probably useless in terms of dimensional and forge mastery magic. The thralls, on the other hand, held the knowledge Dawn wanted for whatever she was planning. Also, Lith had already witnessed how losing the humans seemed to weaken her hold over the vampires. She has another weak point, Naurin said, derailing Lith's thoughts. She is in a weakened state during the night because the only sources of light element are the stars and the moon. Dawn always took undead as her host to compensate for it, but this time she is bonded with a human. You are not making any sense. You told me that she can be buried underground and still access to the light element. So what difference does the solar cycle make? On top of that, Magus World energy holds all the light element she might need. Lith replied, elements have a physical manifestation. Just like it's easier to practice water magic near a river, and you can't practice earth magic without actual earth, sunlight provides us with pure light and fire elements, whereas world energy belongs to Magus. To access a single element, you need to use your mana as a focus to connect with the elemental energies surrounding you. If Dawn tried to absorb huge amounts of the light element from the world energy, the resulting imbalance would kill her. Naurin's words made Lith reflect further on the nature of his accumulation technique. He has a point. As a tower, Solus absorbs all of Magus' life breath, and so do I with my breathing techniques. Maybe, if I find a way to split the world energy into its single components before absorbing it, I could exploit the released energy to accelerate the growth process of my mana core or channel it into. Lith thought before Solus snapped him out of it. There's no time for enlightenment, only for planning. Are you suggesting we should strike now? Lith asked. No, I'm just saying that if we are still here once the sun rises again, we have little chance of survival. We can talk while we move. Naurin took point again. Their lunch break had lasted barely 15 minutes, but with a full stomach and renewed hope, the hybrid felt much better. Despite the barriers separating his life forces, Naurin's Emperor Beast half-coupled with his meditation technique improved his recovery abilities beyond the human level. As I was saying, if we meet Dawn spawns, kill the humans first. Lith explained his theory while Naurin deactivated the arrays they met on their way. After a while, a white light shone in front of the hybrids, making them freeze in place. How the heck did they got in front of us? Lith whispered. We might as well have taken the scenic route for all I know. Maybe there was a shortcut we missed. Naurin replied. I thought you knew the way. Lith cursed himself for trusting his prisoner. I do, but without earth magic, I could only rely on my memory. This place is a damn maze, so I had us take the simplest and only route I could remember that would bring us to our destination without getting lost. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Tell you what, that I was gambling with each turn we took? I'm pretty sure that you would have killed me if you thought I was an unreliable guide. Now, instead, you need me more than ever. Naurin said. The Razar's body was tense and ready for the fight, yet he couldn't stop smiling at the idea that he wouldn't die yet. Lith switched from fire vision to life vision, recognizing Dawn's energy signature in the light coming from ahead. Whatever it was, it emitted vast amounts of mana that was so dense to blind Lith's mystical senses. Lith took the lead, floating a few centimeters from the metal while hiding his smell with a darkness spell. Once he reached the source of light, he gasped in amazement. What remained of the door frame was huge. Judging from the hinges, it had to have hosted a piece of metal of considerable size. The locks and arrays that protected what once was the vault's door were still in place despite the passing of time. The scorch marks surrounding the metal frame and the molten scraps were a clear indicator that Dawn had brute forced her way in by evaporating the door with her light magic. The spell had generated enough heat to deform the rest of the corridor. Yet the real reason for Lith's awe was what lied beyond the gate. It was a squared room with a side of at least 25 meters, 82 feet. At its center, there was one of the most complex machines Lith had seen since he had been reborn on Magus. The device was placed right above the energy stream of the mana geyser. It was similar to the machine Akala had shown him on the upper levels, but more ancient in design. The entirety of the cave's walls was covered with hard light constructs that replicated bookshelves, and each shelf was full of perfectly preserved tomes written in the ODI language. The rest of the room was filled with more constructs that had been shaped like lab desks, and all the non-complex research tools modern forge masters used. Except for ingredients and alchemical analysis devices, Everything was made of solid light. How the heck is this possible? To keep so many constructs active at all times, Dawn should be as weak as a kitten. Lith didn't let his curiosity get the best of him and used invigoration on the floor to look for more traps. Between the mana geyser, the ODI machine, and all that magic, his other mystical senses were blind. Chapter 889 Sorcerer's Apprentice Part 1. Naurend was speechless. Back in his village, he was considered one of the best light masters of his generation. Yet even he had no idea how to answer Lith's question about Dawn's ability to keep so many hard light constructs active at the same time. Be careful. There's so much magic in here that you could hide 100 arrays, and I wouldn't be able to sense them, the Razar said, aware that a single mistake would spell death for both of them. Naurend cast an array-revealing spell that projected into his mind so many magical formations that his knees buckled from dizziness. By my maker, Solus thought while trying to identify the presence of traps. Dawn used light-based arrays to replicate a state-of-the-art magical lab down to the last detail. I wouldn't have ever thought it was possible to combine the Warden and Light Master specializations to such degree. If I ever become able to incorporate them into the tower's defense systems, there's no limit to the applications. No time for enlightenment, remember? Lith cut her short. Just tell me if there are traps waiting to blow us up or not. After his experience at Larule, he had learned how to apply invigoration to a complex system, be it living or magical in nature, without puking his guts out, but to quickly process the information acquired he needed Solus's help. Right, sorry. We can enter the room. The lab is clear. She replied. Are you serious? Lith performed a second check, just to be sure. Yes. Solus emitted a stressed sigh as she examined everything again to calm his paranoia. If there were any trap, the books and the machine would need to be protected by the effects of the traps. Also, to build her lab, Dawn needed a lot of arrays, and there's only so much space in here. Runes cannot overlap, and it took her quite the effort to arrange everything so that it didn't mess up with the array that connects the mana geyser to the machine. Lith stepped inside, and as Solus had predicted, nothing happened. The stone floor and ceiling were the only things not covered in light. Several tunnels departed from the cave. Some were made of metal and seemed to go upward while others looked of natural origin and went deeper underground. Lith didn't know whether to focus on the ODI machine in the middle of the room or on the tomes that were still open on a nearby desk. Both piqued his interest and would be lost the moment the army responded to his distress call. I'm sorry, Lith. Solus thought. There is enough energy coming from the mana geyser for me to assume my tower form, but not enough space. Even if I keep it as small as I can, I would still need to get rid of many constructs, and by doing that I'm sure that Dawn would notice our presence. Naurend couldn't understand why Lith was staring at the lab instead of moving forward, nor did he like the place. Now that they stood on solid ground capable to withstand his weight, he shape-shifted into his animal form. I like those clothes. Lith snarled. Me too. Sorry. Naurend sniffed the tunnels for any sign of their pursuers. I've got good news. From the south tunnel comes a faint scent of grass, so the exit is that way. Also, I'm pretty sure that we have enough lead on Dawn that, by the time she gets here, we'll already be outside the blocking array's range. Excellent, Lith said while studying the titles of the books on the conjured scaffolds. He made sure to not touch the constructs to avoid triggering any kind of safety measure. He believed Solus when she said that there were no offensive spells hidden between the rune's lines, but to embed a silent alarm into an array was a warden's oldest trick. It required to add just a couple of runes, and it would inform the caster every time something or someone interacted with their working. It seems that Dawn has collected all the tomes she has salvaged while exploring the ODI complex here. I don't know if she planned to keep them for herself or give them to the army to increase Akila's reward. Either way, it's all junk. Obsolete magical subjects and reports about the ODI experiment hold no value to me. Lith thought. Not to rush you, Lith, but we are in a pinch. Solus thought. On one hand, we can't dismiss a library after checking a few books. There's still plenty more on the upper levels, and there's another library just as big behind your back. On the other hand, even if we split up to examine everything in the machine, it would take us the whole night, while we have an hour at best before Dawn gets here. I need you to make up your mind, fast. So much for not rushing me. Lith sighed. Don't worry. I have a solution to all of our problems. Gods, no. Solus whimpered. Gods, yes. Lith replied before turning to Nowrand. Listen to me, kid, and you listen to me good because I'm going to say this only once. First, when you fight against an opponent who has much stronger magic power and mastery over an element than you, never use spells without infusing them with your willpower. Otherwise, no matter how strong your spell is, it will be deflected. The memory of Dawn swatting away one of his strongest spells like a fly was still vivid in Nowrand's memory. Finally, the reason for his defeat was clear to him, yet the Razar was baffled by Lith's sudden outburst of generosity. Magical secrets were well kept, and sharing them meant a great deal even to the most insignificant mage. Second, when dealing with multiple enemies, hard-light constructs are much better than heat rays. Lith continued. You can keep using them until their mana runs out, plus you can adjust their output and shape based on the threat at hand. They are not fast, but in close quarters combat speed is irrelevant compared to the versatility of a tool that can be used for both attack and defense. Now start conjuring your spells, because the enemies will be here any minute now. No, they are not. I just told you. Nowrand choked on his words when Solus jumped off Litha's arm and assumed her tower form by siphoning all the energy coming from the mana geyser that wasn't already employed to sustain the array field. The ceiling was high enough to not be a problem, but while she grew in size, Solus smashed several lab tables, turning all the instruments that Dawn had spent days to shape based on her spawn's memories into light shards. An inhuman scream of pure rage made the entirety of the Snake Tongue mountain range tremble, while dust and debris fell from the ceiling on the hybrids' heads. Too bad there's a nasty dimensional magic ceiling array preventing Dawn Dearest from warping here, isn't it? Litho, like a sorcerer's apprentice, at a wave of his hand, the room came to life. Only instead of brooms and buckets, it was sentries and books that flew through the air. Instead of scouting the area, the swarm of glass constructs from Solus's mirror hall scanned the ODI machine from every side and checked the bookshelves at the same time. Chapter 890 Sorcerer's Apprentice Part 2. Every single book that had an even remotely interesting title would float toward the tower's door or windows along with all the tomes that Dawn had left on the lab counters. Lith didn't even bother checking them and took his enemy's opinion at face value. Can your tower form help us in the case enemies get here before we're done? He asked. It can amplify your magic, but I would be a sitting duck. The tower has yet to regain real defensive abilities like barriers. All I can do with the earth-blocking array preventing me from digging underground is becoming invisible. However, even if Dawn wasn't an expert of light magic, by blocking her constructs from reforming the tower walls give away my position. Solus replied, I'll take it as a no. Lith thought while weaving his most destructive spells. According to what you've told me, Dawn and her spawns should be vulnerable to darkness magic. Focus on that and hard-light constructs. He ordered Nowrand. This is ridiculous. If you wanted to kill me, there are countless less idiotic ways to do it. Why are you throwing away your life for some books? The Razar had considered flying away, but the tunnel was narrow. If Lith decided to shoot him in the back, Nowrand would have no way to avoid it. Even if he survived the blast by sheer luck, the wounds wouldn't let him go far. Rather than being at the mercy of the winner, Nowrand preferred to take his chances and fight. I can always run away the moment an opportunity arises. I must survive until Lith and Dawn are too busy tearing each other's throat to mind me, he thought. Luckily for Lith, the swarm of sentries plus the enhanced intellect Solus gained while in her tower form greatly reduced the time needed for a full sweep of the room. She managed to get back at his finger when the first Fang shooting star reached the underground lab. Why are you in your ring form? Lith was worried that the mental strain he had put her through might affect her combat abilities. He had planned several moves ahead, but they all required her assistance. Against an opponent as powerful as Dawn, Lith had to go all out right off the bat. Without Solus boosting Ruin's fusion magic and supporting him with her spells, things would go downhill quickly. Because there's something I have to try. It shouldn't take me long. She replied as another shooting star joined the fray, and the first vampire charged at Lith with the momentum of a freight train. Long is a relative concept when each second could be the last. Lith was already infused with all the elements and attempted to dodge the living bullet, but the vampire shape-shifted into her chiropteran form. It was a giant hybrid between a human and a bat. The creature was 2.5 meters, 8 feet 2 inches, meters tall, with membranous wings connecting her hands to her hips. 10 centimeters long razor-sharp talons replaced her nails, and a thick dark brown fur as hard as steel covered the rest of her body. Her open mouth emitted a beastly screech, revealing fangs as long as short swords. A single flap of her wings allowed the vampire to perform an abrupt turn in midair. Between her high-speed movements and her long arm, she managed to catch Litha's leg. The chiropteran spun on herself, adding centrifugal force to her own, and slammed Lith against the ground. The impact opened a crater 1 meter deep and sucked all the air out of his lungs. Even with Earth fusion and the mana-boosted orichalcum armor, Litha's vision went blurry for a split second. Gritting his teeth allowed him to not lose consciousness despite the concussion, but such focus cost him all the spells he had prepared. On the bright side, even if he was stunned, even if the prism was well hidden under the creature's fur and muscles, Lith managed to use life vision to spot Dawn's spawn. He struck with ruin the moment the undead beast came for the finishing blow. The blade released the spells Lith had infused it with and blew up a hole in the vampire's chest. Without both the prism and her own heart, the creature fell. The second vampire assumed the chiropteran form as well the moment he saw Naurand. The Razar held still, anchoring himself to the ground with the claws on his feet and bracing for impact. He had never faced a vampire before and had forgotten to ask Lith what he should expect from them. The bloodlust exuding from the chiropteran was so powerful that it crippled Naurand's will to fight. Vampires were a link above humans in the food chain. It was something that their victims instinctively knew and that struck fear into their hearts. Naurand swallowed a lump of saliva. His human half was paralyzed by the creature's red eyes that were numbing his mind, lulling him to surrender. His animal half, however, reacted like a cornered beast and lashed out. A wall of light materialized a split second before the chiropteran's claws could reach their target. The impact broke the creature's wrists, but it wasn't enough to stop the charge. Light constructs weren't as sturdy as earth magic and required some time to fully form. The chiropteran smashed through the wall, just in time to see the Razar curled up and charging forward with all of his scales slightly bent upwards. A Razar's body was covered by sharp scales that could be packed together to increase their defense or raised to use them as weapons. The impact sent them both flying back, but while the chiropteran was covered in deep cuts and had sustained several broken bones, Naurand was fine. Adrenaline cleared his head, allowing him to uncurl his body and use his prehensile tail to catch his enemy in midair. The undead didn't feel pain and his wounds were already closing, but all the damage he had sustained slowed his reaction time. The Razar's tail wrapped around his chest and released 2 Tier 4 darkness spells. The combined effect of magic and of the powerful hold generated by the opposing momentum of the 2 titans ripped the chiropteran in half. Before the hips could reattach to the torso, Naurand was on top of the fallen vampire. While their claws were locked into a grip contest, the remnants of the Razar's construct reassembled into a giant spear that impaled both fighters, striking at the prism bulging out the chiropteran's chest. The spear was made of Naurand's mana, so it harmlessly phased through him and cracked the prism. The chiropteran screeched in pain, and his eyes regained focus. Dawn control over him was temporarily lifted. The proud vampire used his claws and all the magic he could muster to dig the prism out of his own flesh. His act of defiance cost him his life. Dawn stopped using her power to heal the minion's wounds, letting him turn into dust. Naurand would have liked to take a moment and marvel at the vampire's bravery, but 2 more creatures had just darted inside the cave. Solus, I need you. I'm running out of tricks. Lith had to resort to invigoration to heal the concussion without getting exhausted. To make things worse, he had only 2 new spells at the ready. Working on it, she replied. The good news is that Dawn is only sending vampires to fight you. Probably she can't afford to lose the human's knowledge and be forced to start from scratch again. Worst case scenario is you 2 versus 6. Chapter 891 Power Source Part 1. Lith decided to gamble and placed his back against the library. He hoped that Dawn would care about the books and wouldn't dare risk damaging them. The vampire in the chiropteran form breathed a white-hot ray of light that cut through stone, books, and shelves alike, as if they were butter. Okay, she doesn't give a crap about them. Duly noted. Lith thought while dodging. This time, the creature was wary of Ruin. The chiropteran kept his distance from the dangerous blade and chose to fight on the ground while using his claws as weapons. The creature retracted his wings under the armpits and assumed a martial arts stance. Both of his arms were coated with light, enhancing the undead's battle prowess. Between his long claws and unnatural arm reach, the chiropteran could use his right hand as a spear when Lith tried to step away and as a sword in close-quarters combat. The left arm was used as a shield, exploiting the fact that the light construct surrounding it became denser and sturdier by the second. To make matters worse, the vampire was able to read every move Lith had used since meeting Akala thanks to the hive mind connecting the undead with the bright day. When one of her spawns died, Dawn would lose their abilities, but she would also retrieve the power she had bestowed upon them and the memories about their last moments. Against an opponent stronger and more skilled than himself, Lith needed the surprise element to win. He was quickly pushed on the defense, without the time to think about what technique was better to save for later. Fine. Playing dirty is a game two can play, he thought while defending against a volley of heat rays. Lith had tried to turn the enemy's long arms into an advantage by getting so close that the chiropteran couldn't attack him without impaling himself, but the vampire had simply engulfed his body in darkness magic to push Lith away while releasing light spells from his fingertips. Dawn's energy could hurt even the vampire, but the holes they opened were too small to affect his movements, whereas Lith had to defend all of his internal organs from the onslaught. Unlike the chiropteran, he needed them to live. Lith dodged half of the heat rays and blocked the rest with Ruin before lunging at the prism with the blade. The vampire sidestepped the telegraphed attack, blocking Lith's arm with his light shield while accumulating a mass of darkness magic in his right palm, ready to unleash it on contact. Gotcha, they both said the moment the vampire performed his counterattack. A black upside-down membranous wing that resembled a slender clawed hand had emerged from Lith's back and was now wrapped around the chiropteran's right arm, keeping it at distance. The vampire could easily pluck the wing off by bending his arm while taking a step back, but the latter was impossible due to Lith having stomped the creature's foot with his own. The talons of Lith's wormling form pierced both the chiropteran's flesh and the rock, thanks to the layer of orichalcum boosting their sharpness. The vampire attempted to bite Lith's head off, only to find a scaly face at his eye level that responded to the attack with a headbutt. The creature's rich battle experience allowed him to react to the unexpected turn of events with but a second of delay. Unfortunately for him, it was a second too late. Ruin had never been aimed at the prism. It was just a ruse to get the enemy in position. Lith's left wing trapped the creature's right arm, while Ruin kept the shielded arm at distance, leaving the chest wide open. Helped by the boosted skinwalker armor and his own darkness-infused scales, Lith ignored the spell protecting the chiropteran. His left arm struck in a spear hand, using his orichalcum-coated claws to pierce through the layers of magic, flesh, and bones that shielded the prism. Dawn had seen Lith fighting long enough to discover that he was an awakened and had played her pawns accordingly. The first vampire's reckless assault was meant to leave the enemy without spells and force him into a hand-to-hand fight that no man could possibly win. Yet her plan had failed because Lith was a man unlike any she had ever faced before. This is impossible. Hybrids can't bond with a member of the family. When the third vampire had died, Dawn was tinkering with her version of the ODI machine located in the upper levels of the caves. Controlling her minions while she performed complex magical calculations and reverse-engineered an ancient device at the same time was a child's play for her. Or at least it was as long as she had enough brains to share the intellectual burden with. On top of that, there were several reasons why Dawn couldn't afford to lose all the vampires of her nest. The humans she had captured granted her knowledge about all the modern magical fields, but the vampires were the ones that allowed her to bridge old and new magical theories. Without the vampires, it was impossible for her to convert her outdated spells into modern and more efficient techniques. Another reason was that the bright day couldn't bond her prisms with humans, only with undead. Thralls were an exception because they possessed two cores, making them part undead. Yet without their sire, their blood core would sooner or later dissipate, and with it her prism. Losing all the vampires meant losing everything Dawn had worked hard to acquire since Akala had freed her. With her nest reduced to 1/4 of its members, it was time to take matters into her own hands. Meanwhile, Naurin was fighting a losing battle. Even with air fusion enhancing his speed, he was a sloth compared to a chiropteran. Also, he had never fought an undead before, so he kept making mistakes like aiming for vitals in the hope of slowing the enemy enough to break his prism. The vampire, on the other hand, had lived long enough to turn killing into an art form, and thanks to the hive mind, she had already witnessed most of the Rizar's best spells. The only reason Naurin was still alive was the light construct protecting him. After killing the first chiropteran, Naurin had split it into smaller energy cores to lessen the burden on his mana cores and use them to attack his next enemy from every side at once. Unfortunately for him, the light spheres couldn't keep up with the undead speed, so he had been forced to use them as shields. The Rizar had already lost several scales and was covered in claw marks. Some were shallow, others were deep, but all of them bled profusely. By the time Naurin managed to mend one bleeding wound with light fusion, 2 more had already been opened. If only I could blink or at least use earth magic. Naurin couldn't believe how unlucky he was. Rezars were supposed to be invincible in caves, yet he felt that his end was nigh. Lith was right about the speed of a spell being meaningless at close quarters, but that bitch keeps her distance. This way, both my constructs and my darkness spells are useless. I could emit a light pillar, but if it gets deflected again, I'm done for. The moment Lith killed his opponent, the last chiropteran standing received the order to retreat. Her problem was how to disengage from the enemy without leaving herself wide open to a killing blow. Chapter 892 Power Source Part 2. The vampire shuddered at the memory of the energy beam that Naurin had earlier unleashed against Dawn. A single spawn wasn't able to use powerful constructs, let alone to defend against an attack big enough to engulf the entire tunnel. Unaware that the battle was already over, Lith used an air spell to fly behind the undead without using his wings. He wanted to keep as many secrets as he could in the case that they failed to escape and had to face Dawn. What are you waiting for? I'll keep her busy until you cast Nightfall. The spell Lith mentioned was one of the most powerful tools the Griffin Kingdom employed against the undead. Both the Rizar and the chiropteran looked at each other in confusion. The former had no idea what he was supposed to do, while the latter looked at Naurin with a mix of admiration and fear. Dawn cursed her bad luck. She knew from Akala's memories that Lith was a great mage, but the Griffin Kingdom entrusting a state secret of that importance with someone that young was unheard of. The ranger must have shared Nightfall with the Rizar while we lost track of them, Dawn thought. Luckily, my strategy made Lith lose his spells, and the kid is too green to fight properly. Dawn ordered the chiropteran to run away. Winning in a 2-against-1 scenario was impossible. If either of them finished casting Nightfall, she would lose another vampire. The creature flapped her wings while using air magic to increase her agility to its utmost limits. Thanks to her superior air maneuverability, she managed to escape from the encirclement and reach the tunnel, exactly where Lith wanted her. In such a confined space, the chiropteran's huge frame was a fish in a barrel, incapable of dodging an area of effect attack. Lith's Tier 5 spell, Raging Sun, created a blast of purple flames right in front of the vampire. The heat and the shock waves produced by the blast bounced on the corridor's wall time and time again, attacking the chiropteran from every side as if it was in the middle of a volcanic eruption. Pieces of stone turned into lapillus that pierced her flesh while the shock waves pulverized her body, and the searing heat made it impossible for her wounds to recover. The explosion also made the tunnel collapse, closing the only way to the underground lab under tons of rocks. This should slow Dawn long enough for us to escape, Lith thought. What the heck is Nightfall? Naurin could finally heal his wounds and regrow the scales he had lost. Wish I knew. Lith sighed, using invigoration at every breath. He had only heard about it during the boot camp. Nightfall was an army secret on par with Royal Forge Mastering, something that would be mentioned to the troops with the goal of encouraging them to do their best and join the elite anti-Balkier Corps. Lith's bluff had exploited Dawn's mind link with Akala. He was a ranger as well and knew how dangerous such a spell was. Otherwise, Nightfall would have just been a random word. Which way is the exit? Lith asked. Naurend pointed at the second corridor on the north wall and took flight. This is my only chance to get out of here alive, he thought. If I stay here, Dawn will kill me. If we run away together, Solus will kill me. Next time, I need a proper strategy on how to contain the bright day once I kill her host. Fighting the spawns had been an eye-opener for him. Driven by his blood rage, Naurend had never truly understood the burden of the task he had undertaken. Like the Razar himself had said earlier to Lith, he was no warrior. He had no experience against undead and had managed to survive until that moment only by sheer luck. Hunting down the bright day had been madness, let alone facing her without having a plan. Unfortunately for him, panic and enlightenment only made him forget that they were still inside enemy territory. The array placed in front of the exit detonated the moment Naurend stepped into it, burying the Razar under a ton of rocks and sealing the only way out. Fuck me sideways. Lith cursed the hybrid's idiocy. Even though Dawn and I have the same problem, our situation is like night and day. We both can't use earth magic to clear the tunnels, but a pillar of light that reached thousands of degrees vaporized the debris blocking the tunnel where the chiropteran was buried. Despite light magic's short range, the light pillar had still enough power to cross the cave and dig a hole the size of a rail tunnel in the opposing wall. Akela slowly floated inside the cave. The ranger shone like a sun, emitting white light from his every pore as if he had broken past the boundary between energy and matter. A priceless gemstone was bulging out of his chest, emitting rhythmical pulses of light akin to heartbeats. Heartbeats that melted the rock and made the ground quake. There was no spell actually lifting Akela's body. The energy surrounding him was so dense that it almost reached a physical manifestation. It was the sheer force of Dawn's mana pushing against the ground that was making him float. Do you have any idea of the delay that your meddling will cause to my plans? The feminine voice was furious, and it definitely didn't belong to Akela. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to find the right undead to enslave? Great, Lith thought, while weaving a spell for each one of his fingertips. Not only is Dawn at the peak of her power due to recovering the strength she had borrowed to the fallen spawns, but I have also to listen to her deranged rants. Where the heck is Solus? Right here, she replied. Sorry if I'm late. I've never attempted to take full control of a mana geyser while in my gauntlet form. That time against Thrud doesn't count because she had already tapped into the geyser to fuel Arthan's madness, leaving me only the crumbs. You did what? Lith couldn't believe their own shared brain as the massive flow of information about the procedure flooded his mind. I usually don't enjoy taking down a fellow cursed object, but for you, I'll make an exception. A long sword made of light appeared materialized in her hands as she performed a downward slash aimed at Lith's head. The mana blade emitted enough heat to distort the air and contained enough power to split a mountain. All the more reason why Dawn froze the moment she realized that her attack had been easily blocked. A blue aura engulfed Ruin's red blade, providing it with so much mana that the runes covering its surface became visible to the naked eye, and all the mana crystals embedded along the blade turned into small suns. The white and the red blade clashed only for a split second. The mana supporting them was equally matched, but it wasn't the same for the arms wielding the weapons. Dawn found herself crashing through one of her conjured libraries before the stone wall behind it stopped her flight. Ancient tomes rained upon her until the bright day was buried under thousands of pages describing the ODI's forbidden magic research. Chapter 893 Killer and Murderer Part 1. It's impossible. Dawn emitted an energy pulse to shook off the ODI tomes that were clouding her vision. Even though I still haven't awakened Akela due to his too powerful mana core, I've refined his body way above the human level. He's almost ready to withstand a blue cord awakening without turning into an abomination, yet Verhen swatted us away like a fly. To reach such a degree of body refinement at his young age, he would need to have awakened in the crib, but that's impossible. And yet it was the truth. Usually, Lith would have not missed the chance to follow up with his attack, but his body was still trembling with all the world energy coming from the mana geyser that was now coursing through him. Solus had assumed her arm protector form, covering his right arm from the hand to the shoulder. Yet it wasn't stable enough to harness the same amount of power that the tower usually would, forcing her to share the burden with Lith and dispel the excess. By my maker, this is worse than I thought. The dimensional and earth-blocking arrays are still in place, so it's time to improvise. Solus's stone body bonded with the orichalcum skinwalker armor, becoming pure silver in the process. In turn, the armor started to expand, reshaping itself according to Solus's arm protector, turning from a thin layer of silvery metal into a thick, full armor that covered Litha's body from head to toes. The world energy coming from the mana geyser now kept the orichalcum in its boosted state without the need of mana from Litha's core. The good news is that I've just tapped into the full potential of your equipment, me included, Solus thought. The bad news is that, unlike me, neither the sword nor the armor was made to withstand this kind of power. It's only a matter of time before they collapse. Lith cursed his bad luck, resuming his attack the moment he regained control of his movements. Dawn had recovered as well and plunged her hand inside the crystal on Akila's chest, taking a prism out of it. The prism changed its shape into a long sword, working as a scaffold for the light construct and further boosting its power. Now the blades were equally matched, and so were their bearers. Dawn had on her side hundreds of years of mastery above all forms of combat, but Akila's body couldn't keep up with Litha's speed or strength. It was a bout of technique against physical prowess. Lith managed to evade all the attacks because he was faster, whereas Dawn did the same by predicting his movements and dodging before an attack motion had even started. Not bad, boy. Keep entertaining me like this, and I could take a fancy to your body. Dawn conjured countless hard light constructs shaped as blades around them, each one holding the same destructive power of a Tier 4 spell. Sorry, sister, he already has a girlfriend. Also, you should at least offer him a drink first. Solus cast the Tier 5 spell, Setting Sun, taking both Lith and Dawn by surprise. The Bright Day still believed that Lith was the rival cursed object's personality, whereas Lith just hated witty banter during a fight. Solus, what have we said 1,000 times about answering a madman? Lith thought, while the sphere of black flames generated by the spell erupted from his body. Instead of keeping Setting Sun active, Solus had it detonating to throw Dawn off guard and blast her constructs away. That it makes us sound just as crazy. She replied, yet that's your style. She already knows about my existence, so there's no point in hiding. I'll do things my way. The mix of fire and darkness ate through Dawn's aura, burning away Akila's uniform. The ranger lost all of his body hair, and his skin became charred from the heat. Dawn healed his host as fast as Solus's spell damaged him, using her own life force to provide Akila's body with endless vigor. This doesn't make any sense. I've watched this Verhen guy with life vision earlier, and he wasn't this powerful. I have never heard of a member of the family capable of holding their ground against a horseman. For the first time since she had bonded with Akila, Dawn was regretting her choice of not replacing the ranger with an undead. The 3 horsemen of Baba Yaga were not meant to bond with humans because they limited the artifact's potential. Baba Yaga had sired her children to help the members of the undead race, not the humans. Dawn's plan had been to exploit Akila's mortal body to more easily awaken him, while hoarding the fame and resources necessary for her research. Only once the Griffin Kingdom had outlived its usefulness would she turn her partner into an undead and join the courts as their rightful ruler. She had never expected to face an opponent who would force her to go all out. Dawn's gemstone shone once more and covered the ranger with crystal-like scales that were an extension of her own body, bringing their fusion to the next level. At the same time, she willed for her burning light blades to bounce in mid-air and strike at Lith. We're still surrounded, Solus warned him. He could either defend against the spell or against Dawn. Lith confided in his own forge mastery talent and let the constructs hit his orichalcum armor. The spells had lost part of their power, but the distraction they caused was enough for Dawn to regain the upper hand. Her crystal blade pushed Ruin's tip aside, leaving Lith exposed to her Tier 5 spell, Daybreak. It was a mix of light, fire, and darkness magic that generated a wave of dark energy, followed by a volley of fiery constructs shaped like snakes. The darkness would weaken the target and seal off their senses, be them physical or mystical, while the hard light constructs attacked from every side. The light would paralyze the enemy, the heat would burn them, and the darkness would destroy any form of protection they had. To make matters worse, as soon as 2 constructs made contact between them, They would fuse, and a new one would be generated until they became a small sun sealing both the darkness and the enemy at its heart. Oh shit. Lith was too close for a flight spell to be enough. He had to take out his wings to escape from the first volley. Yet all he achieved was to buy some time. The constructs kept following him, and even though they were not as fast as heat rays, they were much more dangerous because they didn't fade after their passage. Lith could only dodge so many times before all the space inside of the cave was filled with light constructs, leaving him no place to hide. I could try to escape in a tunnel, but I have no idea where they lead. On top of that, Dawn could detonate the corridor just like I did. He thought. Lith used dominance to spot the weak points in the constructs, striking at them with ruin whenever he could. Daybreak shattered in several places, but all Dawn had to do was to use more mana to repair the damage. Meanwhile, the pulse of darkness kept following Lith like a malevolent shadow, cutting off his escape routes and further limiting his movements. Chapter 894 Killer and Murderer Part 2. How the heck can she separately control two parts of a three-elemental spell? Lith was amazed by Dawn's ability, yet he had no time to waste. The room was becoming hotter by the second, and every time one of the constructs so much as grazed him, not even the orichalcum could protect him. The armor blocked the hits, but not the heat they produced, turning the boosted skinwalker into an oven. Lith and Solus both were weaving water spells non-stop to cool the armor, but low-tier magic couldn't keep up with Daybreak. Suddenly, a pillar of light aimed at Dawn emerged from the second collapsed tunnel. Naurend had managed to dig himself out and had decided to do something instead of waiting for death. Dawn attempted to redirect it to Lith, but the Razar had learned from his mistakes. This time, the spell was infused with willpower and without dominance. Dawn had no way to wrestle its control away. The hit sent her against the wall and turned the crystal scales covering her body black from the heat. Yet it wasn't enough to make the bright day lose her focus. Daybreak continued its onslaught, devouring even origin flames as if they were nothing more than candles. Do you remember me, murderer? Naurend roared while using up all the mana he had left to keep fueling the pillar that nailed Dawn to the wall. Is this the big dream you always told me about? To become a monster, no worse, the puppet of a monster? Was it worth killing my people? Answer me, you coward. I'm so sorry. This time the voice coming out of Akila's mouth was his own. I never meant to harm anyone. I didn't choose Dawn, she chose me. We were destined to be together. It was your people who tried to take her away from me. I just wanted to. To what? To betray our trust? To run away with the relic like the thief you are? Naurend cut him short. I know how the bright day is capable of twisting any mind, no matter how strong, but that takes time. Back then, you two had just bonded. She had no hold over you. It was you who got intoxicated by her power and used us as target practice. You who burned down the village to make sure that no one would survive. Even now, you've betrayed your beloved country, slaughtered your kinsmen, and for what? For some money and respect? That's not Dawn, that's you. Tears of regret streamed down the ranger's cheeks as the memories of the time he had spent at the Razar's village flooded his mind. Akila wasn't used to feel guilt for his actions. Dawn was skilled in keeping his memories disconnected from each other, making sure that each and every one of his crimes appeared to be the response to injustice, no matter if real or just perceived. To pursue her ends, she still needed Akila, especially when dealing with the kingdom and with the people that knew him well. They didn't bond for long enough to have absolute control over him, so she still needed his consent. The barriers she had placed in Akila's mind shattered, forcing him to face the full price others had paid for his choices. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Your people had everything. You had strength, magic, and artifacts, whereas I had nothing. All I asked you was to teach me light magic. Everything that's happened is your fault. You hid Dawn from me and tried to take her away once she found me because you didn't want to share with me the gifts that she bestowed upon you. I only acted in self-defense. It was your people who attacked me first. Akila said, we were trying to save you, not to kill you. Dawn's powers have killed my tribe, but it was you who murdered them. Naurend replied. I said shut up. All the lies that Akila had repeated to himself to justify the carnage crumbled. Over time, Dawn had corroded his mind to make him weak and obedient, but at the same time, she had brought Akila on the brink of madness. For the first time in a long while, The Ranger and the Bright Day fought over the control of the body they shared. Akela wanted to kill Nowrand because in his deranged mind, once the Razar was dead, all the proof of his crime would disappear, and with it the guilt he felt. Dawn, instead, knew how hard had it been to corner Lith, and she had no idea if she could manage to do it again. Not only did the Ranger seem to always have an ace up his sleeve, but also Dawn was certain that she had yet to understand the full scope of Solas's abilities. The struggle taking place inside Akela's mind diverted Dawn's focus from that in the outside world and made her daybreak spell slower. An opening. Lith had discovered the innate weakness that kind of construct had, but only when it was too late to exploit it. Daybreak's strength lied in the fact that even if its extremities were destroyed, they could easily reform thanks to its underlying structure. At the same time, however, if the construct was damaged near its source, then everything past the breakpoint would be cut off from the caster and collapse. Lith had tried to attack the ever-growing structure at one of its critical points earlier, but all Dawn needed to foil his attack was to change the place from which the construct expanded. Lith had almost got caught in a pincer attack, and after that, he could only wait for an opportunity to appear. Until that moment, he had hoped that Dawn couldn't sustain a construct that big and powerful for long. The bad news was that so far reality had proven Lith wrong. The good news was that it didn't matter anymore. Lith flew in a spiral pattern, dodging the snake-like constructs that Dawn conjured every time he got too close. Unfortunately for her, between the excessive complexity her spell had reached and Akela's meddling, the waves of light were now too slow. Even at such close distance, the wind that air magic pushed beneath Lith's wings allowed him to dodge, even if just by a hairbreadth. The Skinwalker armor's surface turned from silver to red due to the intense heat, constantly boiling and reforming as Solas put air bubbles in between metal layers to slow down the melting process. By the time Lith reached his target, half of the full suit of orichalcum armor had evaporated and the skin beneath was covered in blisters. Lith pierced Daybreak's focal point with Ruin, using its enchantment to disrupt the flow of mana beyond repair. Once the head of the snake was cut off, the body started to wither. The giant mass of light and heat went haywire and triggered a chain reaction that dispelled the darkness pulse that had never stopped chasing Lith. The destruction of most parts of the construct compromised its integral structure, making the shockwave generated by Ruin's enchantment spread backward toward Dawn as well. The resulting explosion vaporized Akela's right hand from which the spell originated. With Daybreak's disappearance, the temperature in the room quickly started to drop and Lith went blind due to the flash his strategy had caused. Yet he didn't need sight to find his target thanks to the smell of burned flesh filling the air. Chapter 895 Real Magic Part 1. Solas focused on regenerating the Skinwalker armor, turning the vaporized metal back into its liquid state. The orichalcum droplets rained on Lith's body from every side, piercing through everything that stood on their path until the armor was whole again. The silvery storm of small blades further distracted Dawn and allowed Lith to unleash upon her 3-tier 5 spells at the same time. Tidal Bolt was a mix of water and air magic that bypassed Dawn's constructs and drowned her in a highly conductive tsunami. The salt water seeped through every crack of the crystal armor and into every orifice of Akela's body, allowing the lightning bolts that circled around the wave like a school of sharks to always hit their target. Tidal Bolt not only damaged Akela inside and outside, but also induced powerful spasms that prevented the enemy from casting spells. At the same time, Lith conjured Setting Sun from his right hand and Dark Ages from the left. A black sphere made of fire and darkness formed in his hand and split into 2 beams that struck Akela's head and heart at the same time, burning them to cinders. Dark Ages, instead, synergized with Tidal Bolt and added darkness magic to the mix. The final result was an electrified spear of black water the size of a truck that struck at Dawn's crystal the moment Akela's body had gone limp, without giving her the time to conjure any kind of defense. Lith had learned from the Black Star that a cursed object was more vulnerable as long as they were connected to their host. Just like it happened to Solas and him, any wound the host received would badly affect the relic's mental state and drain its energy. Once she detaches from Akela's body, Dawn will become nigh indestructible. This time I have no access to her blueprints, so I have no idea how to permanently destroy her. I can only contain Dawn until the army gets here. After that, it's their problem, he thought. Solus didn't share his optimism and kept an eye on the situation as a whole. I'm almost done repairing the artifact originated from my fusion with the Skinwalker armor, and Lith is still in great condition. The world energy from the geyser made him capable of conjuring many powerful spells at the same time and of withstanding their burden. Yet I'm afraid that he is in a no different condition from his equipment. Lith's body is not meant to harness that kind of power. The pseudo-tower I've enveloped him with can relieve him only from a part of the stress. Dodge. A telepathic yell was nothing like a real one. It didn't hurt Lith's ears or mind, nor was a generic warning. Solus's yell was akin to a game's quick-time event that projected in front of Lith's eyes the direction he was prompted to move to and the source of the danger. Lith dashed downward, using gravity magic to further boost his speed and managing to dodge the hail of light spears that had materialized behind his back. What the fuck? Solus and Lith thought in unison. Trias died once I decapitated him. Heck, even most undead can't survive without their head and heart. Akala was a human. There's no way he's still alive. Lith thought while staring at the corpse that was getting back on its feet. This doesn't make sense. I'm sure to not have missed any movement in both Akala's and Dawn's mana flow. Solus couldn't find an explanation for the light constructs that had formed out of thin air and were currently giving them chase. By my maker. Even during our three-pronged attack, Dawn kept enough focus to control the lingering energy from her previous spell. These constructs are simple, that very same light element rearranged into a different form. Lith had a hard time accepting that such a thing was possible, but the spears were as real as they were deadly, so he focused on destroying them with quick pulses of darkness magic rather than arguing with her logic. To make matters worse, crystal shards were growing from Akala's wounds, replacing his head, heart, and right hand with inorganic counterparts. Thanks, I appreciated the help. Dawn's voice had become clearer than before. The constant use of powerful spells had weakened her mana flow, whereas injuries, no matter how severe, didn't seem to bother her. You've inflicted that dimwit so much pain that it will take Akala a week to come out of the coma. If I bother giving him his brain back, of course. Sharing is such a hassle. The familiar light from the body sculpting spell enveloped Akala, shape-shifting him into a feminine form of alien beauty. The bright day appeared now as a woman of untold age, about 1.78 meters, 5 feet 10 inches, tall with golden eyes without pupils. Her skin was whiter than an albino's while her waist-long hair was pitch black. Dawn's body was covered by the full suit of crystal armor she had conjured. Its countless facets absorbed instead of reflecting the light from her surroundings, restoring Dawn's powers and shrouding her in darkness. Yet the armor was bright, acting as a conduit for the radiance that came from Dawn's real body, the gemstone resting between her bosom. Just like her daybreak spell, the contrast between light and darkness, between black and white, made her look as if a real dawn was taking place in the underground cave. Lith and Solus were shocked, but their brains never stopped trying to find an explanation for the apparent immortality of their enemy. I think I have the answer. Solus thought. Dawn and Akala are just like us, but reversed. Meaning, Lith was too focused on weaving a new set of spells to bother solving her riddle. Dumb it down for me. Hard. Remember what Moger told me? That as long as my body is intact, that as long as my life force is bounded to yours, it's very hard to kill me? It's the same for Akala, but in their case, Dawn is the dominant personability. It means that Akala is part of her instead of being Dawn a part of him. She said, "Fuck me sideways. Unless I pulverize the entirety of his body, she can bring him back to life." Lith had no idea how to achieve such a feat. 3 combined Tier 5 spells had barely been enough to pierce Akala's heart. More or less. You skipped the part where he suffers the pain of every wound, and the regeneration is probably in agony as well, but I guess that sums up our situation. Solus replied, "Why the silent treatment, sister?" Despite being a couple of heads shorter than Lith's hybrid form, Dawn managed to look down upon them by floating in mid-air like a goddess descending among mortals. "You were so chatty before. Why don't you at least introduce yourself?" The bright day opened her right hand, releasing a scorching pillar of light from each one of her fingers. "Yeah, right. With our luck, She'll recognize me, and maybe even know how to destroy me. I need an alias. Solus thought while Lith combined footwork, flight spells, and flaps of his wings to avoid Dawn's constant onslaught. Not only was each pillar as strong as those that Naurin produced by expending half of his mana, but the Bright Day was also capable of keeping all 5 of them active at the same time and of adjusting their trajectory according to Litha's movements. Chapter 896 Real Magic Part 2. Fuck the kingdom and the rewards. My life comes first. Lith darted back and hid behind the ODI machine in the middle of the room to catch his breath. Just as he had predicted, Dawn still needed the device for her own research. Being the one who had helped the ODI in their experiments, she knew all too well that there was only one built. Smart, but not enough. The Bright Day ceased her attacks and moved behind the machine as well. Okay, she's exactly where we want her. Solus nodded. Really? Lith didn't even get a full breath of invigoration that Dawn was already looming over them. Really? Let's be real. She is as strong as I would be in my tower form if I was at my full power, if not even stronger. Fighting her with magic is suicidal since she outclasses us in experience and number of spells. Our only choice is to force her to fight us in close quarters. Her body is still based on Akala's, which makes her way weaker than you. She explained. You forget that she outclasses me in swordplay and hand-to-hand combat as well. Even with the boost from your pseudo-tower form, we were on equal footing. Lith darted forward, closing the distance between them before Dawn could cast a single spell. We don't have time for a full tutorial. Do you trust me? Solus asked. Why do you think I threw myself into the tiger's mouth? I trust you with my life. Always. Lith gave Solus free reins and activated full guard. The blue aura that now surrounded him brought his perception on par with Dawn's. The spell bestowed upon him a full awareness of his surroundings, leaving no blind spots in Litha's guard. A crutch for the weak. Dawn recognized the spell and clicked her tongue in disgust. I dare you to repeat that after giving up both your immortality and your centuries of experience. We're not weak. Solus replied. We? Really? The Bright Day chuckled, her voice both old and young at the same time. Are you young, naive, or both? She lunged her crystal sword in a feint, waiting for Lith to sidestep the attack before changing her stance with a flick of her wrist. Dawn dodged Litha's counter stab, throwing him off guard, and aimed for his heart. Lith was in no position to defend himself, so he turned the lunge into a roll without trying to stop his motion. The crystal sword pierced through his armor and gut, cauterizing the wound on its passage to make it harder to heal. Lith didn't feel anything thanks to darkness fusion sealing off his pain receptors, but his situation was still dire. During their previous fight, Dawn had been controlling Akala's body, a tool she barely had a few months to get accustomed to. Now she was using her own, and the difference was like heaven and earth. All of her attacks were seamless, with no wasted movements nor openings. She had reached such expertise that she would predict even moves that Lith had learned back on Earth. Guess my sensei was right. All disciplines become similar at very high levels. Here goes everything. Lith still couldn't understand Solus's plan, but wound or not, he trusted her judgment. He pivoted on his back foot right after the roll, turning around toward the enemy and slashing diagonally at the same time. Dawn intercepted Ruin's tip with her own blade, pushing it aside. Lith added the momentum from her push to his own, spinning on himself to perform a right elbow strike aimed at her temple. Smart, reckless, but not enough. Dawn blocked with her right arm. The blow still managed to crack her bones that were now bent in an unnatural angle, but her crystal sword would have pierced Litha's head before he had the time to adjust his stance. Or so she thought, until a second right arm came out of his side, striking at her chin with an uppercut and throwing her off balance. A second left arm grabbed Dawn's broken and unresponsive arm, pulling her too close to use her sword, but in the perfect position to take 2 right hooks at the same time. One on Dawn's left temple and the other on the side of her chin. The full force of such blows would have killed even an awakened way stronger than Lith, but for Dawn, internal organs were just like a pair of socks. She could always make another. Only then did Lith remember that in her tower form Solus could materialize her body. Feeling their bodies partially fused was weird, but personal space and boundaries could wait for a non-lethal situation to be discussed. I am neither naive nor young. Solus replied to keep Dawn off her game while they kept hitting her non-stop from impossible angles. Ruin danced from one hand to another in an unpredictable pattern. The bond they shared ran so deep that even if they had never practiced before a four-armed style, it was second nature to them. No matter who wielded the blade, the other was always ready to assist or pass Ruin the moment Dawn started to adapt. It's you who are ignorant and conceited. Horseman, Dawn, call yourself whatever you want, but the truth is that you're nothing but a parasite. Solus's words enraged Dawn, whose face was full of deep cuts and her armor of wide cracks. The bright day couldn't understand how a lesser member of the family could stoop so low to share instead of dominating a filthy hybrid, let alone how could their combined efforts have put her into such a disgraceful condition. You and I are both born from forge mastery, but you've forgotten the basics of the basics. Solus couldn't stop talking. The teachings of Minadion were becoming clearer again in her head as she fought. You don't just place the most powerful mana crystal above the mightiest of metals. That's something even a child can do. The real magic starts when the two become one. Solus passed Ruin to Lith, using her arms to conjure and compress all the world energy she could muster from the geyser. Lith understood her intentions and breathed a jet stream of origin flames that set ablaze Solus's world energy as well, turning the jet into a pillar of fire the size of a road tunnel. The blast pinned Dawn to the wall, and its force prevented her from moving while the stone around her melted and boiled. Not bad for a wormling. Dawn laughed. Origin flames of that magnitude blocked all forms of magic, and the soggy stone didn't offer her any hold, but she didn't care. It's as large as the breath of a dragon. Too bad that it lacks the punch of the real thing. I've fought ancient dragons and phoenixes, yet I'm still here. What makes you think you're any better? Dawn asked. Gods, Lith is right. You guys always talk too much. Solus added a spark of her own life force to Lith's, and the blue origin flames became a searing white ocean. The crystal armor blackened and cracked. The crystal sword lost all the mana it held, and then crumbled along with her four limbs. Dawn's head, the only part of her body that the armor didn't cover, burned to ashes, leaving behind only the chest holding her crystal. Yet once the flames were gone, Dawn's armor self-repaired, and her limbs grew back again, whereas Lith could feel that Solus's light had become dimmer, like a candle about to burn out. Chapter 897 Back Home Part 1. What the heck did you just do? The consequences of Solus using her own essence to strengthen the origin flames terrified Lith. Even inside our tower, you don't even have a real body yet, let alone a stable life force. Taking physical form here is madness. Semi-immortal here, remember? Even her thoughts were reduced to whispers. As long as my body is intact, as long as my life force is bonded to yours, I can't die. That's bullshit. What if you burn your personality or your memories? What if you lose yourself and become nothing more than a tool? Lith asked. Even then, I'd still be part of you. She replied. Ready for round 2? Dawn only needed to create another prism spawn to replace her lost crystal blade. For the second time in a single day, a roar of pure rage made the entirety of the Snake Tongue mountain range tremble while dust and debris fell from the ceiling on Dawn's head. Lith refused to lose Solus just as strongly as she was willing to push herself to keep him alive. After almost 5 years from their first and last quarrel, the most powerful mana crystal and the mightiest of metals became one. Solus's and Lith's mana cores aligned along with the tower's pseudo-core that was able to manifest itself thanks to the partial link with the mana geyser. All three of them grew in size and power, reaching new heights. His body changed as well, growing a second set of membranous wings that, unlike the one already on his back, the second set wasn't upside down and it was gold-colored. Lith's chin split, forming a second maw below his own, and both growled with fury. He now stood over 3 meters, 10 foot, tall, covered in scales the size of a brick. Usually Lith's body couldn't grow past a certain point because no matter the form anyone shape-shifted into, their mass wouldn't change. This time, however, the tower could provide him with everything he needed. He was now too big for the skinwalker armor to contain him anymore. The silver of the metal couldn't hide the pitch-black scales mixed with new golden ones, both with their edges blood red from the heat sealed within Lith's body. All 7 eyes were opened, and none was yellow. The red, black, blue, white, and emerald green eyes stared at Dawn with such hatred that if looks could kill, not even the power of Mogur's son could save her. The remaining two emitted a dimmer light and were golden-colored. The moment the fusion restored her life force, Solas's eyes shone as bright as Litha's, staring at the bright day in cold fury. This doesn't bode well. Dawn clicked her tongue, quickly reassessing her situation. Even though she had no vitals, her energy wasn't infinite. Otherwise, she would have never been defeated by Sinmara the Phoenix, nor the Razar clan would have been able to detain her for so long. Casting so many powerful spells, generating spawns to shape her equipment, and regenerating her body several times had taken a heavy toll on her. Until a moment ago, Dawn had been sure of her victory because whatever the wormling was doing, not only was he still weaker than her, but she could also see with life vision that his might dwindled over time. Now, however, the thing in front of her was brimming with power and seemed royally pissed off with her. Fuck my luck, Dawn thought. 7 eyes, and the white one is already open. If this guy can exert dominance over my spells, this is going to be. A left black clawed hand came down on her with the speed of a lightning bolt. There was no wasted movement nor any tell preceding the attack, yet Dawn managed to predict its course thanks to her rich battle experience. She sidestepped the attack and struck at the wrist with her blade. Lith changed the course of his hand with a flick of his shoulder, catching both the crystal sword and the arm wielding it in midair before crushing them under the raw strength of his grip. At the same time, both right hands grabbed Dawn's left leg and arm while she was still recovering from the surprise, slamming her against the ground until all her remaining limbs shattered. That's enough. Even without a head, she could still talk thanks to air magic, just like Solas did. Dawn cursed the array, preventing her from warping away, and used what energy she had left to produce a light pillar that shot upwards, digging through tons of rock until the night sky was visible. Then, she bolted through the opening she had dug and run towards safety. Litha's maws opened. The first emitted a near-violet flame, while the other released a deep cyan fire. The two flames met halfway, fusing into a jet burst of white fire that chased after Dawn that further widened the hole in the mountain. Yet it wasn't fast nor strong enough. Dawn's words about having survived against elder dragons weren't just for banter, but hard facts. Her crystal was slightly cracked and only bits of Akala's body remained, but they were both alive and kicking. Her light pillar had damaged the already patched-up remains of the ODI arrays, and Litha's burst of flames had done the rest. High in the night sky, Dawn disappeared into a warp steps that led her thousands of kilometers away, back to Baba Yaga's hut. Back home. The link between the three horsemen and their creator had never been severed, allowing them to always know where to find her. The hut was temporarily located in an open field in the Giera continent, where the sun was still setting. From the outside, it looked like a hunting cabin. The small wooden house had a pitched roof, only one door, and one window on each side. A clothesline filled with fresh laundry was located in front of the hut, giving the impression that a couple of newlyweds had started their new life there. Dawn knew better and took her time to deactivate the multiple layers of deadly arrays that surrounded the cozy cabin. By the time she was done, the remaining sunlight had sealed the cracks in her crystal and returned her part of her strength. "Welcome home, Donnie," said a soft voice as she crossed the threshold. Baba Yaga, the first awakened to have ever achieved the white core of immortality, was sitting on a simple wooden chair, mending a pair of short pants belonging to a kid. A small pile of damaged clothes rested on a nearby chair, while another pile of those she had already repaired was placed on the table beside her. Baba Yaga looked up at her daughter, yet her hands never stopped moving. "What are you doing in this dump, Mom?" Dawn was referring to the Giera continent, not to her ancestral home. "My children have failed me as it happens so very often, but I'm still their mother. I'm here to see if the damage can be undone or if I can at least give birth to a new species capable of thriving in this new world." Baba Yaga looked like a young maiden barely 16 years old, with waist-long golden hair and clear blue eyes. Her voice was silvery and her body had the never-ending energy of youth. It was the incarnation of those who had little past and a long future ahead of them. The Form of Dawn. Chapter 898, Back Home Part 2. That's what all those children's clothes are about. Dawn sat on Baba Yaga's lap. To regenerate Akila's body would take a lot of energy, and she was too weak for that. Dawn made sure to preserve just enough of his tissues to not let her host die. Of course, dear. Baba Yaga smiled at the feeling of her daughter's warmth spreading through her womb. She now looked like a beautiful woman in her 40s, with flaming red hair and emerald green eyes. Her voice was calm and wise. Her body had the reassuring aura typical of good mothers. It was the incarnation of those who had reached half of their lifespan. She had as much past as future, the form of dusk. Children are our future and the best material to work with. She tilted her head, pointing at the huge boiling cauldron on the fireplace, filled to the brim with meat paste and blood. Have you heard about that lich? Visa? Baba Yaga's face was disfigured in a grimace of disgust while saying the word lich. Yes. What about it? Dawn asked. I'm really happy she failed. I hope the death of that imbecile and of all her followers brings my children back to the right path. How can someone be so stupid to want to rule? Why should a predator worry about the weak, spending their time to make sure that they thrive and prosper? Why so few of my children understand that the reason why so many kings and emperors look for immortality in their twilight years is that they realize that the throne sucked the life out of them, that they spent their whole lives amassing power and never really using it? I never intended for any of you to have a country of your own, to bind you with chains of duty. I just wanted my children to have a second chance at life, a better life. Why do they obsess themselves with the human way? What makes them so special? Among the 5 races, they are the most miserable. Baba Yaga angrily cut the thread hanging off the needle with her pearly white teeth. Because they have the greatest potential for destruction. Dawn chuckled. Can't argue with that. Baba Yaga scanned the area surrounding her hut, finding no human life form for hundreds of kilometers. Why are you here, darling? And what about your new flesh suit? Is this living host thing a new phase, or did you just want to try something new? Both. Dawn told her mother all about her imprisonment, her bonding with Akila, and all the doors that his petty mind had opened for her. What a charming fellow. I hope he treats you right. Baba Yaga wore a soft smile while listening to her daughter's plans. Dawn was one of the few to have never disappointed her. He sure does. Now comes the best part. Dawn told her about her encounter with Lith and Solus, about what she had discovered about them. Golden eyes, symbiotic, and capable of drawing power from mana geysers. Sorry, dear, it could be anyone. I have no idea who she is. No, Mom, it's not her, the funny one, but the thing she is bonded with. Dawn had no intention to reveal Lith's true identity to the Griffin Kingdom nor to blackmail him. The former would have only made him more interesting to whoever had a working brain, while she considered the latter a coward's weapon. She had other plans in mind for him, and the bright day didn't want her gift to be ruined before it was ripe for the taking. Baba Yaga had taught her children all she knew, so there were few things they couldn't define. A full-grown hybrid that can merge with members of our family. Someone who can exert dominance above at least 5 elements, and has an affinity for both the fire and darkness elements. Dawn explained. He could be the perfect sword that little sister Night has always looked for. Interesting. Baba Yaga turned into a hunched crone with gray hair and stone-cold black eyes. Her nose and ears were long, her face full of wrinkles. Age spots covered her skin, making her look weak, but her voice was full of strength. It was the incarnation of those who had more past than future, holding the wisdom of age and the bitterness of regrets. The form of Night. If you are right, and that's a big if, I don't like the idea of Night being the first to get her sword. Baba Yaga said. Just like her Night Court, she's free and unrestrained like I always wanted for my children. But she's also as chaotic as them. She never has a plan, always going rage first and blood second. Not to mention the mess she makes with every one of her meals. The only undead species that have gone extinct were her blind followers, and she's the only one who had me tussling with guardians to save her sorry ass. Check upon him if you want, but share your findings only with me. Your little brother Dusk can't keep his mouth shut to save his life, and I can't trust Night with that kind of power until I'm certain that she's worthy of it. Meanwhile, inside the cave, the destruction of the arrays had left only the ODI machine to diminish the world energy that flowed through the mana geyser. Everything else was now under Solus's control. The energy allowed the tower to grow to its full size, adding new mass to the body Lith and Solus shared. The hulking figure staring at the hole in the mountain had a wingspan that almost reached either side of the cave at the same time. It's convenient to go in and out, but it would be too hard to explain. Lith and Solus spoke in unison as if one was the counter-melody of the other. The creature raised their hand and channeled a fraction of the energy coursing through their body to make the hole in the mountain disappear. Usually, a team of wardens and several Tier 5 arrays would have been necessary to restore the hundreds of tons of destroyed rocks, whereas all it took them was a thought. Then, they cleared the 2 collapsed tunnels, creating a believable escape route for themselves. Akila's betrayal would already be hard to swallow for the army. Dawn was the perfect way to explain everything that had happened in the Snake Tongue mountain range, but the story had to be told properly. What was left would earn him plenty of merits, money, and, unfortunately, glory. If the kingdom had only half an idea what Dawn was capable of, Lith couldn't afford to claim to have sent her running without incurring more questions than he wanted to answer. The undead have warped away as well. Solus's mana sense had now a range that covered the entirety of the underground complex, allowing them to keep an eye on everything and everyone that went in or out. Which begs the question, why are you still here? They asked Naurend, who was sitting against a wall. Because I'm tired. After the end of the fight, Naurend had reverted to his human form. I'm tired of fighting, tired of running away. I've lost everything I held dear, and one way or another, I've achieved my revenge. Chapter 899, The Red Sun Part 1. I've no regrets left, do what you have to do. Naurend closed his eyes, finally at peace with himself. For the first time in months, the images of his village burning down didn't flash in front of his eyes. Naurend would never forget the agonizing screams of his friends and family, but those sounds had stopped haunting his ears. All he could hear now was silence. He had always imagined that revenge would make him happy, but he felt empty instead. His life had no meaning anymore. Without revenge, he was just a lonely man. It's funny, you know. Naurend chuckled at the irony of his situation. Once you kill me, the only people to remember my name will be 2 cursed objects. Life sure has a twisted sense of humor. How many times do I have to tell you that we're not a cursed object? The creature was calm, yet the tinge of annoyance in their voice was enough to make the ground quake. Lith wanted to kill Naurend until a few minutes prior, but now Solus was one with him, forcing Lith to look at things through her golden eyes. When she looked at the disheartened hybrid, she didn't see an enemy. Solus saw Naurend as Derek McCoy, and in turn as Lith. They both had suffered an unjust fate, losing their loved ones, and ending up on a quest for revenge. Like Derek, Naurend was now seeking death after achieving his goal. Is this who you are? Solus asked. Are you still the same angry man whose only gift is death? The upper mouth of the creature opened in a snarl, while the lower was bent down in a mournful expression. If you really want to die, you don't need our help. We will not carry your burden. The creature said after a long second. If you seek life, instead, if you want to take your time and rest while you decide what to do next, follow this map. A piece of paper appeared out of their pocket dimension, with the location of Protector's house marked. Tell them that we sent you. They will not care about who you are or what race you belong. They'll give you a place to call home and more trouble than you can imagine. The creature chuckled at the idea of how happy Celia was going to be having someone that would keep her company and help her with the kids. Now go. They handed a few clothes and a small bag of money for the travel expenses to Naurend. It was more than Lith would have given him, but less than Solus would. Yet neither of them minded because it wasn't a compromise, they were one. The army will be here any minute now. The creature waved their hand, warping the hybrid right outside Xantia. They were shocked by their own prowess. Opening a warp to such distance with the same ease as if it was just a blink was beyond their wildest dreams. Yet there was no time for patting themselves on the back. Their situation was quite dire. They weren't aware that Akila was still alive, so they expected that the death of a ranger coupled with the absence of dimensional blocking arrays would cause the prompt intervention of the army. They had already concocted a perfect explanation for everything. Yet there was still a problem that even their combined might couldn't overcome. The creature had no idea how to go back to being 2 separate entities. Even after warping out of the cave, outside the area of effect of the mana geyser, they were still fused. Their body was much smaller now, back to 3 meters, 10 feet, of height. But that was it. The wormling was genderless, but they were afraid of finding their privates mixed if they reverted to a human appearance. Fuck us sideways. This is bad as it is, but there's still plenty of room for things to get even worse. How can we? Their trains of thoughts derailed when Litha's army amulet pulled at his consciousness. Camilla's rune was blinking. Lith and Solus shared plenty of things, but his feelings for Camilla weren't among them. Their fusion came undone the moment her image popped into their minds. Well, it's been way easier than I thought. Lith sighed in relief at the sight of his body exactly as he remembered it. Solus was at his finger, and her life force was brighter than ever. Are you all right? He thought. My body is in tip-top condition, but my mind is royally messed up. Their fusion included sharing all their past memories and thoughts, even those that they had chosen to keep for themselves. Unlike when they decided to perform the mind fusion alone, they wouldn't be forced to relive all the past events from their other half's point of view, but such memories could still be accessed as if they were their own. When Camilla's rune had blinked earlier, they had instinctively access to their now shared most recent memories. For Solus was just the worry that being a royal constable could be too much pressure for her, but for Lith, it regarded his intention to move their relationship forward. The news had been so shocking for her that it had broken their fusion. Let's promise to not look into each other's memories as long as the experience is still vivid in our minds. She said, Oh my, have you been a naughty girl in my absence? Her request didn't make much sense to Lith. He never looked into her memories, and when he thought about something, he always looked for something specific. He always had too much at hand in the present to wander in his past. You're not funny. She sounded angry, but her mind was in the telepathic equivalent of violently blushing up to her ears. I never wanted to peek at your alone time with your girlfriend, just like my experiments on my own body were meant to remain private. Oh my, you've experimented on your body. Lith kept teasing her, enjoying her turning purple from embarrassment. Shut up and answer the damn amulet. But first promise me you won't try anything funny. Solus cursed her slip of the mind. I promise. He replied while taking the call. Ranger Verhan, do you copy? Is this a good moment? The handlers had waited a few minutes after the amulets belonging to their respective ranger had become active again before trying to make contact. That way, no matter if the mission was already accomplished or had they been forced to escape, the two rangers would have the time to hide. Akela wasn't picking up, so Camilla was relieved hearing from Lith. Affirmative. The threat has been dealt with, and I'm currently in a safe zone. He replied. Is Ranger Akela with you? Why isn't he answering his own call? He's alive. Lith and Solus couldn't believe their own ears. They searched the night sky, almost expecting dawn to pop out of thin air and attack them. Affirmative. His rune is still active and available. Do you need to go back and search for him? Camilla started to arrange for a rescue team and a field hospital to prepare for what she considered to be the worst-case scenario. One or both rangers maimed and in a near-death condition. Chapter 900 The Red Sun Part 2. No, but it means that this is not a good moment to talk. He's gone rogue. I need to establish a safe zone. I'll call you back as soon as I can. Lith replied. Way ahead of you. Solus opened a warp steps leading to the nearest mana geyser. She took her tower form and activated all the cloaking and defensive mechanisms at her disposal. Only after Lith was inside the tower and they were ready to tower warp at a moment's notice did he contact Camilla. Meanwhile, his words had shaken the control room, and Commander Barian had ordered to pinpoint the traitorous ranger. I'm sorry, sir. Ranger Akela is out of range. I can't provide you with nothing but general information. The young Lieutenant Guyless had his mouth as dry as the desert. A ranger going rogue was hardly their handler's fault, but depending on the gravity of the betrayal and the bad news he brought, Guyless was afraid the High Command would demand someone to take the blame. He was likely to be the prime candidate. What do you mean, out of range? Even if he crossed the borders, we can still locate one of our amulets inside the Empire or the Blood Desert. Varian hated incompetence. In his book, a handler was more than a paper pusher issuing orders from above. Their duty was to bond with their operative enough to provide them psychological support and catch wind of anything wrong with them. His log moves him from above the Snake Tongue Mountain straight to Giera, Guyless said, making the entire control room become silent. When Lith called, Barian took charge and demanded a full report. Lith had shape-shifted the tower so that the space around him looked like an underground cave. Seeing him hold up, made Barian change Camilla's request for a rescue team into a spellbreaker unit. Lith explained all that had happened since the last contact, lying solely about the ending. In his version of the story, he and Naurend had run away in different directions after dealing a seemingly lethal blow to Dawn's host. At the first mention of the bright day, Barian ordered Lith to stop talking and move the conversation to his personal office, bringing only Camilla with him. As Lith's handler, she had to be aware of the contingency measures the army would prepare in the case the two met again. If several spawns are still alive, why did you say that the threat has been dealt with? Barian asked. Lith cursed his bad luck, racking his brain for a believable lie. In the original version of the story he had prepared, Akila's death had left Dawn weakened and forced her to reabsorb her minions, giving Lith and Naurend the opportunity to escape. Now, however, the only way Lith found to avoid his lies from being exposed was by adding another piece of truth to the mix. Because according to Naurend, it takes time for the cursed object known as the Bright Day to choose and adapt to a new host. I assumed that after losing Akila and being her plan exposed, she would retreat along with what's left of her undead force. Now I'm not so sure anymore, he said. Don't worry about it. The two of you must have taught the Horsemen of Dawn quite a lesson if it ran off to Giera. Barian laughed merrily while thinking about the big promotion that he would surely be awarded with. The appearance of the Bright Day was just another piece of bad news for the Griffin Kingdom, but it meant the world to him. It was only thanks to him ordering the two rangers to work together that Dawn's plan had been foiled. While the upper echelons of the army, led by General Marone Griffin, wanted to remove Lith from duty after the events of Kulla, it had been Barian who had vetoed the adoption of any disciplinary measure against Lith. That, plus the discovery of a new ODI ruin, was bound to make Barian into a one-star general, maybe even two-star. After finishing his report and reassuring Camilla about his well-being, Lith called Faluel to inform her of Dawn's presence in the kingdom. Lith couldn't risk Akila catching her unprepared in the case the Bright Day decided to settle their score. Dawn knew who he was and about Solas's existence. Cursed objects seemed to consider her a traitor, so in Lith's mind, messing with his family was a twofer for the Horsemen. I'm glad to hear you are all right, kid. I was going to save the bad news for later, but we need to talk. The 7 heads of the Hydra were focused on the amulet, which meant that the matter at hand was serious. Now might be impossible. Lith pointed at his uniform. Don't worry, it's nothing urgent. Your presence in the army will actually prevent most from bothering you, but I want you to be prepared. The moment when you're not a ranger anymore, before you become my disciple, you'll be at your weakest. No one will have your back. Also, having a horseman after you can change your life in a bad way. Come visit me as soon as you can. Not even this channel is safe. She said. Wait, is it because of Dawn, of the Human Council, or because of the awakened undead who backed Erlich? Lith asked. Yes, don't worry about Naurend. I'll give Protector a hand with his accommodation. Faluel ended the call while Lith was still showing off his extensive vocabulary of swear words. Frigging smartass. I wonder what else can go wrong. Lith moved out and waited for the spellbreaker unit. Everything was like he had left it, the makeshift warp gate, Dawn's machinery with her prisms still attached, and even the underground lab comprised of her light constructs. The ancient ODI machine was the only thing still intact in there, whereas several books had been destroyed or damaged during the fight. It was a blessing in disguise for Lith, because no one noticed those he had taken and assumed they had been destroyed as well. The only sour note was a message attached to the white prism, bearing a kiss mark and the words, "Hope to see you soon, sister." Not even a blind, deaf, and dumb person could mistake Lith for a woman, and the army was aware of the friendly competition between Baba Yaga's children, so everyone just assumed that the Black Knight was involved as well. The result was the kingdom raising the defense readiness condition for the Keller region to the highest level and making Lith's feat appear even more outstanding. Yet he knew that the message was addressed to Solas. Whatever Dawn was planning, clearly it wasn't over between the two sentient artifacts. Dusk Court, right after the news about Akila's betrayal spread. The Red Sun, also known as the Horseman of Dusk and the Hushed King of the Dusk Court, wasn't pleased by the current situation of the Garland continent. He had only a few sources left in the royal army, and he wasn't going to put them to risk just to read about such a trifle matter like Dawn's defeat. Most of his information came from both the royal and undead court gossip, and from the bard's tales that were sung annoyingly often during social events. If the corpse he inhabited had even a single vein still working left, it would have popped.